Am I the asshole for cutting all contact with my family because of a prank? At 27, I bought my first home. But instead of celebrating with my family, my siblings turned it into a cruel prank. The day I bought my house was one of the best days of my life. I had sacrificed so much to get there: nights out with friends, vacations, small indulgences that would have been nice but weren't necessary. But that day, I finally had a place I could call my own. I could actually say I'd made it. I hadn't planned on sharing the news with my family right away. Our relationship had always been complicated. But, I figured, maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd see me for the hard work I'd put in, for how much I'd sacrificed to get here. Maybe they'd actually be proud of me for once. We had a family dinner a few weeks after I closed on the house. I'd invited everyone over: my mom, my brother James, my sister Claire, even some of my extended family. It felt good, sitting there, hearing them congratulate me. My mom even teared up a little and told me how proud she was of me. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that from her until she said it. I thought, maybe things are changing. As the dinner went on, I was starting to relax. Everything felt normal. Almost too normal. We had a couple of glasses of wine, everyone was laughing, and then James and Claire handed me an envelope. "A little surprise for you," they said, grinning like they were in on some inside joke I didn't know about. I was confused, but curious. Maybe they'd gotten me a gift, something funny. I opened the envelope and pulled out what looked like a legal document. My heart skipped a beat as I saw my name on it, along with the details about the house. I started reading, but the words didn't make sense. It said that my house purchase had been canceled due to some clerical error, and that it was being sold to someone else. I read it over and over, but the words wouldn't change. It felt like the floor had dropped out beneath me. My mind raced. This can't be real, right? This has to be some kind of mistake. I looked around the table, hoping someone would speak up and explain that it was a misunderstanding. But no one said a word. Instead, my brother burst out laughing. "Gotcha!" he yelled, and the whole table followed suit. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking as I looked at the fake letter in my hands. The air in the room felt thick. I could hear them laughing, but it felt like I was drowning in it. I managed to choke out a few words, but they barely reached my own ears. You really thought this was funny?" They didn't stop laughing. Claire pulled out her phone and started recording, like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. It made me feel like a joke. The joke was me. They didn't even care that they were making fun of something that meant the world to me. "Emily, it's just a prank," James said, barely able to catch his breath through the laughter. "Lighten up, it's not that serious." I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. I couldn't stay there. "Not another second. You don't get it, do you?" I said, voice trembling. This was everything to me. This wasn't just some joke. This was my dream, and you just crushed it. They shrugged it off. "You're so sensitive," Claire said, still laughing as if everything was fine. I couldn't take it anymore. I left the dinner early, walking out without saying another word. Tears blurred my vision as I drove home. I didn't know what hurt more, the prank itself or the realization that my family could do something like this and think it was okay. I don't remember exactly how I got into my car, but somehow, I was there, hands gripping the steering wheel, my body still shaking. The whole drive home felt like I was floating in a fog, numb to everything around me. I couldn't even tell you if I was crying or not. The only thing I could feel was the heaviness in my chest. My body had gone on autopilot, but my mind was racing. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a long time, parked, just staring ahead. The house I had worked so hard for, something I finally had for myself, felt so distant now. I thought I could finally breathe easy. But all I felt was the weight of my brother and sister's laughter, echoing in my head, tearing through every inch of my pride. I pulled my phone from my bag. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe some message of support, maybe some comforting words. But all I saw were their text guilt trips from Mom, more mocking messages from James and Claire. They had sent me a bunch of laughing emojis, like it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever gotten upset over. I couldn't deal with it anymore. I dialed Mia. She's one of the few people who gets me. She picked up almost immediately. "Emily, hey, what's going on?" Mia's voice was warm, but I could hear the concern there too. I was barely able to speak at first. The tears came, all at once, like a floodgate had opened. I sniffled and wiped my face. "Mia, I thought they were proud of me, but they turned it into a joke. Why do they do this to me? Why does everything I do get turned into something to laugh at?" There was a pause. I heard Mia take a breath before she spoke again. "I'm so sorry, Em. I know that must hurt like hell. You've worked so hard for this. This wasn't just any achievement. It was your dream. And they turned it into something petty." I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself, but it wasn't helping. "It's like, it doesn't even matter to them. I worked for years for this house. I sacrificed so much, and they didn't even care. They think it's funny, Mia." She didn't say anything for a moment. I could tell she was thinking. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, calm. "Emily, I'm sorry, but this isn't your fault. You didn't do anything to deserve that. They crossed a line. And I get that it's family, but family should build you up, not tear you down. I couldn't stop the tears. I know, but it's hard, you know? I feel like I'm tearing the family apart by cutting them out. I feel like a burden. I don't want to keep causing drama, but I can't let them keep doing this to me. She was quiet for a moment before saying softly, "You're not a burden, and you don't have to keep tolerating their shit just because they're family. They need to learn consequences. And you need to learn to protect yourself, even if it means walking away." I wiped my eyes, nodding, but still feeling conflicted. The tears weren't stopping, and the pain didn't seem to go away, but at least I had someone who understood. I tried to laugh a little through my tears. Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. "No, you're not," she said firmly. "But I get it. You feel like you're overreacting because you love them. But think about this, you've dealt with this for years. You've done nothing but take the punches. It's time to stop." I took a deep breath, trying to convince myself. I can't keep living like this anymore. I'm proud of you, Emily. I know this isn't easy, but you've got to take care of you first. You can't keep letting them drag you down. It wasn't easy, cutting them off. Honestly, it felt like I was being pulled in two directions. On one hand, I knew I had to do it. I knew that if I didn't stop the constant stream of hurt, I'd be stuck in this cycle forever. But on the other hand, they were still my family, my brother, my sister. I wanted to believe that things could be different, that they'd finally see how much they'd hurt me and apologize. But that moment, the prank at dinner, it was the tipping point. I'd been letting their cruelty slide for years. They'd humiliated me over and over, and each time I swallowed it down, telling myself it was just a joke, just something to laugh off. But no more. I couldn't keep doing that. I started by blocking them on social media. I couldn't bear to see their posts, their fake sympathy in the form of prayers or love in the comments. It was like a slap in the face every time, and I didn't want to feel that anymore. So, I blocked them. It felt freeing, but it also felt like I was closing a door I wasn't sure I was ready to shut. Then came the family invitations. I started declining them. "Sorry, I'm busy. I've got plans already," whatever excuse I could come up with. The truth was, I just couldn't face them. I couldn't be around people who didn't care enough to understand how much they were breaking me. And the thought of being in a room with them, laughing and acting like everything was fine, made me sick to my stomach. But it wasn't all easy. There were days when I'd sit there, staring at my phone, wondering if I was overreacting. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe it wasn't that big of a deal, right? Maybe I just needed to let it go. I'd catch myself thinking these things, even after everything they'd done to me. I remember one night, sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone. I saw a message from my mom. "We miss you. You're tearing the family apart. Please come back." It broke me. She always had a way of making me feel guilty, like I was the one doing something wrong. I thought about calling her. I thought about apologizing for being so dramatic, for breaking ties with everyone. But then I remembered. I remembered the time they'd spilled coffee on my favorite interview outfit just to mess with me. The time they pretended they lost my dog to watch me panic. It wasn't just this prank, it was everything they'd done over the years, every time they crossed a line and laughed it off as if I was just being too sensitive. Maybe I was sensitive, but why did I have to be the one to always let things slide? Why was I the one who had to keep pretending it was okay when they treated me like crap? I put my phone down. I felt a little lighter, a little more sure of myself. Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. But I can't keep living like this anymore, I muttered to myself, feeling both exhausted and relieved at the same time. The decision was final. There was no going back. My family had to understand that their actions had consequences. I didn't owe them any more chances. I owed it to myself to finally stop tolerating their bullshit. The first few days after I cut them off felt oddly peaceful. I didn't have to worry about constant text messages, emails, or phone calls demanding my attention. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But that didn't last long. It started with the guilt-tripping messages. I remember the first one like it was yesterday. I was sitting at home, scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from everything. And then, there it was, an incoming text from my mom. "I miss you so much. I just want my family back together. Why are you doing this to us?" I read it once, twice, 3 times. The words stung, but what hurt more was the way it made me feel guilty. Like I was the one causing all the damage. I was the one who was tearing the family apart. I felt this wave of exhaustion hit me, like I'd been carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders for too long. Was I really doing the right thing? It wasn't just my mom. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. They'd guilt-trip me in every way possible, calling me selfish, telling me I was being childish, and that I was ruining everything. I started to doubt myself again, like maybe I was being too harsh. I hated how easy it was for them to make me feel like I was the problem, and in a way, it felt like I was giving up on something important, family. But then, I reminded myself of everything that led me to this decision. I opened my messages again, scrolling down to the newest one. It was from Claire this time. "You're really going to just leave us like this? We're family, Em. Do you even care about that?" Her words felt like a slap in the face. They were trying to paint me as the villain for setting boundaries, like it was my fault they'd gone too far and crossed every line. I could feel the guilt crawling up my throat, wanting to choke me. I even started typing a response. I wanted to say something, anything to make it stop. Something like, "I'm sorry, but I just need some space," or "I didn't mean for things to get this bad." But as I started typing, I paused. I took a breath and closed my eyes. I had to remind myself, I wasn't doing anything wrong. They crossed the line. They humiliated me over and over again, and I had to draw the line somewhere. I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe them anything. I stared at the phone screen for a few more seconds, my finger hovering over the send button, and then, without another thought, I deleted the message. I deleted the entire conversation. It wasn't easy. I wanted to respond, I wanted to fix things, but I couldn't, not this time. It was then that I realized how exhausted I truly was. I wasn't just tired from the prank. I was tired of being the one who always made excuses for their behavior. Tired of accepting their treatment because I thought I had to. Tired of feeling like I had to carry the burden of keeping the family together when they wouldn't even respect my boundaries. I put my phone down, trying to push away the sinking feeling in my chest. I reminded myself again, I'm not the problem here. At first, I thought they'd eventually get the hint. I blocked them on everything: social media, phone, email, and I had stopped responding to their messages. I honestly believed they'd respect my decision and back off. I should have known better. It started innocently enough, if you can even call it that. The first time they showed up uninvited, I was in my living room, watching TV, trying to distract myself. Then I heard it, knocking. I froze, unsure of what to do. I didn't even get up. I knew who it was. My heart started pounding in my chest. They knocked again, louder this time, followed by the sound of James calling through the door. "Emily, we know you're in there. Come on, let's talk this out." I ignored them. I wanted to believe they'd just leave if I didn't engage, but no, they just kept at it. They banged on the door. Then Claire joined in, yelling, "You think you can hide from us? We're family, get over it already." I could hear them laughing outside, clearly recording it all on their phones. It wasn't even an attempt to make amends, it was just them trying to break me down again. I felt this sickening tightness in my stomach, and my whole body went tense. I wasn't going to open the door. I couldn't, but when they didn't stop, I called the non-emergency line. I didn't want to involve the police, but it was getting too much. I felt like I was being harassed in my own home. The officer who answered was understanding, but they told me there wasn't much they could do unless something physical happened. So, I let it go for the moment. But the next time was worse. They came back. I had just gotten home from a long day of work, and there they were waiting for me. James was sitting on my front steps, and Claire was standing by my car, taking pictures. "You really think this is over, huh?" James called out when he saw me walking up. He grinned, like this was some kind of game. "We're not done with you yet." I tried to stay calm, but it was impossible. "What do you want from me?" I called out, standing a few feet away, just trying to put space between us. "Oh, nothing," Claire said, barely looking up from her phone. "We just want to make sure you're not hiding in your little house like some scared little girl." The mocking tone in her voice hit me harder than I expected. They were treating me like a joke, like I was the one in the wrong for wanting nothing more than peace. And that's when it happened. I heard the unmistakable sound of something hard hitting my car. I turned my head just in time to see James throwing a raw egg at the side of it, the yolk splattering across the window. That was it. I snapped. I rushed to my car, my heart racing, my hands trembling with anger. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I screamed at them, but they didn't even flinch. James was already laughing, wiping his hands on his pants, while Claire just stood there, grinning like she was proud of herself. "We were just trying to have some fun," James said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You need to lighten up, you're way too sensitive." I couldn't even respond. My chest tightened, and I felt this unbearable mixture of rage and humiliation. They had crossed the line so many times, and now they were damaging my property for what? A laugh? I walked into my house, slammed the door, and locked it. I couldn't believe what had just happened. The anger inside me was boiling, but it was also mixed with this deep sense of violation. They had come into my home physically and emotionally, and I had nothing I could do to stop them. The next day, I woke up to a message from Claire. "You're going to laugh about this one day, Em. We're family, remember that." But I couldn't laugh. Not anymore. This wasn't just a prank anymore. It wasn't funny. This was harassment, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. My anxiety was through the roof, my trust was shattered, and I felt completely helpless in my own home. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew I couldn't let them keep doing this. I was done being their punching bag. The egging incident was the last straw. I sat in my living room, staring at the mess on my car, my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles ached. I knew I couldn't just let this go, but at the same time, something inside me hesitated. I thought about calling the police, but part of me was terrified of what that would mean. In my mind, it felt like involving the police would be the ultimate betrayal. After all, they were family. Shouldn't I just handle this on my own? Wasn't I supposed to just suck it up and deal with their nonsense like I always had? But then I thought about it. I thought about how, over the years, it had never gotten better. It wasn't just a prank anymore. This wasn't about some stupid joke anymore. This was about harassment. About crossing boundaries and not caring about how much pain they were causing me. The thought made my stomach churn, but the more I sat with it, the more I realized something. This was my home. This was supposed to be my safe place, the one place where I could relax and be myself. I shouldn't have to feel scared to walk outside. I shouldn't have to wonder if they were lurking outside my window, or if they were going to show up and vandalize my car again just for kicks. So I made the call. I remember the moment so clearly. I hesitated at first, dialing the non-emergency line, my heart pounding in my chest. What would the police think of me? Would they judge me for calling over something as trivial as a prank? My hands shook as I waited for the operator to pick up. 911, what's your emergency? I froze for a moment, unsure of how to even begin. Hi, this isn't an emergency, but I need to file a report for harassment, I said, trying to steady my voice. My siblings have been coming to my house uninvited, making a mess, and last night, they threw eggs at my car. There was a pause on the other end. I could tell the operator was processing it, maybe even wondering if I was overreacting. She didn't say anything at first, but then her voice softened. I understand. We can have an officer come by to take a report and review the situation. I gave them all the details, how they'd shown up uninvited multiple times, how they'd mocked me, how they'd damaged my property. The more I said it out loud, the more I realized how far this had gone. I wasn't being overdramatic. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't a joke anymore. This was real, and I needed to protect myself. When the officer arrived, I explained everything again. He seemed sympathetic but also professional, like he had dealt with family drama before. He looked at the footage from my security cameras, footage of my brother and sister standing in my driveway, laughing as they threw eggs at my car, mocking me as I walked up. The officer's expression hardened as he watched the footage. This is unacceptable, he said, shaking his head. It looks like harassment, plain and simple. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders hearing him say that. It was validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This was real, and it needed to be addressed. Do you want to file a report? He asked. I nodded, feeling a bit of fear and relief mixed together. Yes. I can't keep letting them do this. I don't know what else to do. After he left, I sat in my living room for a while, thinking. I felt conflicted, torn. On one hand, I was relieved that I'd taken steps to protect myself. I was starting to feel like maybe things could change. On the other hand, I still struggled with the thought that I had involved the police, that I'd taken it to that level. I kept thinking about all the times my family had tried to gaslight me into thinking I was the problem, about all the times I had to swallow my pain just to keep the peace, but I couldn't do it anymore. My peace, my safety, were worth more than their manipulation. This is my home. I shouldn't have to feel scared in my own space, I whispered to myself, trying to remind myself that I had done the right thing. It wasn't easy, but the decision was made. I wasn't going to let them keep terrorizing me. They needed to understand that their behavior had consequences. The day the restraining order was issued felt like a strange mix of relief and emptiness. When the officer handed me the official document, explaining how my siblings were legally ordered to stay away from me, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't over, but it felt like a turning point. A line had been drawn, and they couldn't just walk over it anymore. But even with that official piece of paper in my hand, the dread of what had happened still loomed large. It was one thing to finally feel protected, but another to realize just how far things had gone. They had pushed me to the point where I had to take legal action. My own family, the people I was supposed to be able to trust the most, had done this to me. I didn't hear from them immediately after the restraining order was granted. I wasn't sure what I expected, maybe a moment of clarity from them, or a guilty apology. Instead, it was the same mocking attitude that I'd gotten used to. The next day, I woke up to a text from Claire. Well, aren't you just the drama queen? I stared at the message, a wave of frustration washing over me. I knew it was coming. Of course they were going to brush it off like it was nothing. Like they hadn't crossed every line imaginable. I took a deep breath and typed back, my fingers shaking slightly as I pressed send. I don't owe you my peace anymore. I paused, looking at the screen, feeling the bitterness in my chest. It was a small victory, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control. I had taken a stand, and I wasn't going to let them trample all over me anymore. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel this hollow ache in my chest. This wasn't how I imagined things would go. I didn't want a restraining order against my own siblings. I didn't want to have to cut them out of my life completely. But they had pushed me to this point, and now there was no going back. Later that afternoon, James sent a text too. It was short and sharp, almost like he was daring me to engage. You're a joke. Just wait, you'll come crawling back eventually. I stared at the message, not even sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much he'd hurt me, but I stopped myself. I realized that engaging with him would only feed into the cycle. Instead, I put my phone down and walked away. The truth was, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. It wasn't that I regretted my decision, it was the right one, without a doubt, but the reality of cutting them off, of making it official, stung in a way I didn't expect. These were my siblings. We'd spent our whole lives together. I never imagined that it would end like this. But what choice did I have? They couldn't keep treating me like I was nothing, like my feelings didn't matter. They couldn't keep violating my boundaries just because we shared blood. I leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in a long time, I felt peaceful. The constant weight of their presence, of their disrespect, was gone. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. I wasn't living in constant anxiety about the next prank or the next humiliation. My home was mine again. My peace was mine again. But the sadness still lingered. I couldn't shake the thought that my family wasn't just the people I'd cut off, they were the people I had hoped would be there for me, no matter what. The reality of that hope slipping away was hard to stomach. I closed my eyes, letting the silence of the house wash over me. It was a new chapter, but it came at a steep cost. It's been a few weeks since the restraining order was issued. A few weeks of silence, real silence. No knocks on the door. No more taunting texts. No more eggs on my car. No more harassment. At first, it felt almost unreal. Like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for them to come barging back into my life like nothing had changed. But they didn't. And every day that passed, I felt a little more relieved, a little more certain that I had done the right thing. I didn't expect it to feel like this, though. For the first time in a long while, I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside my window, the smell of coffee brewing in my kitchen, and the absence of anxiety in my chest. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. This house, this space, this was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally take a deep breath. There were days when I still felt the weight of the loss, though. There was the occasional text from an extended family member, asking if I was okay, or telling me that I should forgive them. There was always that sense of guilt in the back of my mind, telling me I should have tried harder to make things work, that maybe I was too harsh. But then I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to fix things, trying to make everyone happy, trying to play the part of the dutiful daughter and sister, only to be knocked down over and over again. I never thought I'd have to fight for my own peace. For so long, I thought that family was supposed to be a safe place, a place where you could just be. But instead, it had been a constant source of stress, anxiety, and pain. And I fought for so long to hold on to something that wasn't even healthy. But now I've made it here, and that's enough. I've finally learned that peace doesn't just happen, it's something you fight for. It's something you choose. I spent the next few days sorting through things, packing up boxes that had been collecting dust, rearranging the furniture, and throwing out old things I didn't need. Every little change I made in this space felt like a step forward. I was making my home more mine, more comfortable, more of what I needed it to be. I took time for myself. I spent a day at the park, walking around the lake and just breathing. I met up with friends who supported me, people who respected my boundaries. I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells anymore. I didn't feel like I had to hide or explain myself or make excuses for wanting peace. But, as much as I loved the calm, I couldn't ignore the sadness that lingered. My family had always been this constant presence in my life. No matter how much they hurt me, no matter how much I tried to convince myself I didn't need them, I still missed them sometimes. I missed the idea of family, of being able to sit at a table and laugh together, of feeling like I belonged. And that was hard to let go of. But then I reminded myself, this is what it feels like to belong. This is what it feels like to have peace. I walked around my house that evening, taking it all in. The soft lighting in the living room, the smell of dinner cooking in the kitchen, the cozy blanket on the couch. I wasn't waiting for someone else to make me feel at home. This was my home. I had earned it, and I had created a space where I could finally be myself. I sat down on the couch, wrapping the blanket around me, and let out a long, steady breath. I realized then that I'd never have to worry about feeling unsafe or anxious in my own home again. The damage had been done, yes, but I was healing. I was taking control of my life, one decision at a time. I thought about everything that had happened, about the pranks, the humiliation, the pain. And then I thought about everything I had gained, my peace, my freedom, my space to grow and heal. I never thought I'd have to fight for my own peace, I said softly to myself, looking around my home. But I've made it here, and that's enough. So my dad passed away a few months ago, and yesterday I found out that he left the entire pound 3M estate to my two younger brothers and nothing to me. Why? Because I'm a woman, and according to him, my future husband will provide for me. I'm 27, single, and nowhere near getting married. My brothers are 21 and 23, both doing well for themselves, but they took the money without a single question. I worked my ass off to be independent, and to be told I don't need money because of some outdated, sexist belief made me furious. My family's treatment of me has crushed me, but I stood up for myself and got what was fair. I had been handling things pretty well, considering the whole dad's gone situation. I mean, I was sad, of course, but I tried to stay focused. I'm the responsible one in the family, the one who handles things. But then, a couple of months after the funeral, I got the call. It was a Friday afternoon. I was at my desk, working through a mountain of emails when my phone rang. It was the lawyer. My heart dropped a little, but I figured it was just some technicalities to sort out. You know, stuff like clearing out dad's accounts or whatever. But when I picked up, the lawyer's tone was off. "I'm sorry to call like this, Delilah. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to let you know that the will has been finalized, and your father's estate has been distributed." I sat up straight, immediately thinking, finally, we can get this over with. I was thinking about how we would divide things up between the family who gets dad's old car, who gets the family heirlooms, all that. But then he dropped the bomb. "Your father left the full estate to Jake and Matthew," he said, like it was no big deal. My stomach dropped. I couldn't even process what I was hearing at first. "Wait, what? What do you mean the full estate? My share is?" I could hear the discomfort in his voice. "He made it clear in the will he felt that you were independent enough to not need financial support. He mentioned that your future husband will provide for you." I just froze. I mean, I knew my dad had his views, but this was something else. To hear that, in 2025, when I'm a grown woman with a full career and independence, was crushing. The lawyer tried to soften the blow. "Look, there's not much I can do. This is what your father decided." I could barely keep it together. "You're telling me that my brothers, who are 21 and 23, get everything, and I get nothing?" "That's correct," he said, "but perhaps there's something you can discuss with your brothers, or with a lawyer to make things clearer." But that was it. That was the moment everything changed. I hung up the phone, still not believing what I'd just heard, and then, the tears came. I felt everything flood in all at once. The hurt, the anger, the utter disbelief. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the inheritance. It was the fact that my father, the man I'd tried to please my whole life, still saw me as someone who wouldn't need money because some guy would take care of me. Someday. That was the real sting. I stormed around the apartment, trying to get myself together. But I couldn't. I was shaking. I wanted to scream. This wasn't just about Dad's death anymore. This was about every single time I'd been overlooked or underestimated for being a woman. And now, it was all laid out in a will that I had no say in. I grabbed my phone. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not this time. I was fuming. Every part of my body was shaking with anger, and I couldn't sit still. I grabbed my phone and dialed Jake's number, my 21-year-old brother. He answered almost instantly, his voice as casual as ever, like he was answering a call from a friend. "Hey, what's up?" he said, sounding like he had just rolled out of bed. I could hear the TV in the background. I almost snapped, but I took a breath. This wasn't about him being casual, it was about everything that had just happened. "Jake," I said, my voice already tight with frustration, "how could you accept Dad's inheritance without even questioning it?" There was a pause, but it was short, like he wasn't even surprised by the question. "What do you mean? Dad made his choice. I'm just following what's been decided." His tone was so nonchalant it made me want to scream. He wasn't even seeing it, he didn't get it. Not at all. I couldn't believe I had to explain this to him. I clenched my jaw and pushed forward. "No, Jake, you don't get it. You took money from Dad because he thinks I don't need it because I'm supposed to get everything from some future husband." I could feel the tension building as I spoke, and I was livid now. He was quiet for a second, probably trying to process it all. But then, he hit me with it. "It's not a big deal, Delilah. I mean, it's Dad's decision. You'll be fine. You don't need the money, you've always been independent, right?" My stomach twisted, and my chest tightened. "You'll be fine." Of course, it was easy for him to say that he'd never been dismissed like this before. He'd never been made to feel like his independence didn't matter. But that wasn't it. It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that Dad didn't even think I deserved it. That I wasn't capable of taking care of myself because someday when I might get married, and a man would provide for me. "Jake," I said, my voice rising, "you seriously don't see the problem here? This isn't about me being independent. It's about Dad thinking I'll always need someone to provide for me, like I can't manage my own life. I worked my ass off to be independent, and you're just sitting there acting like it's no big deal." There was more silence, but this time it felt uncomfortable. Like Jake was finally starting to feel the weight of my words, but then, he pushed back. "I don't know, Delilah. I just don't think it's that big of a deal. It's what Dad wanted. It's his money, his decision. We don't really get a say in it." I could feel my blood boiling now. "You do get a say in it, Jake. You just didn't care enough to question it. And I can't believe you're dismissing me like this." I could hear him fidgeting on the other side of the line, probably trying to figure out how to backpedal without admitting that maybe, just maybe, he was in the wrong. "Look, I'm just following what's been handed down, okay? I'm not the one who's deciding this stuff." The casual tone in his voice made me see red. This was the problem. His complete lack of understanding of what was going on here. "You don't get it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're letting this happen. You're just going along with it, and it hurts, Jake. It hurts that Dad saw me like this. Like I'll always be some dependent little girl." I didn't want to keep yelling. I could feel the tears stinging at the corners of my eyes, and I hated that. I hated feeling this way. "I don't even know why I'm talking to you about this. You obviously don't care." And with that, I hung up. Hard. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, and I paced the apartment like I had ants in my pants. How could he not get it? How could he not understand how much this hurt me? It wasn't just the money, it was the fact that he had accepted it. Without question, without even thinking about the message it sent. He didn't care. I stood there, furious, my mind racing. I wasn't going to let this slide. I couldn't. Jake had no idea how deep the wound was, but I was going to make sure he understood eventually. But for now, I felt so small, so invisible. And the worst part was, I was starting to think I was the one who was crazy for feeling this way. I thought maybe Jake was just too young to fully get it. Maybe his naivety was to blame, but Matthew was different. He was 23, old enough to have some understanding of the world. He'd seen me struggle, he'd seen how hard I worked, and yet, he still couldn't see the problem. So I dialed his number, already anticipating the frustration that was about to pour out of me. "Hey, what's up?" Matthew answered, his usual laid-back tone coming through. I could hear music in the background, probably the same playlist he'd been listening to for years. It irritated me, how casually he answered. How normal he sounded. Like everything was fine. "Matthew," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "How could you just accept the inheritance without questioning it? Did you even stop to think about how this affects me?" I could hear him pause, and I imagined him sitting up in his chair, trying to figure out how to handle this conversation. "Delilah, I get that it's upsetting. But Dad's point made sense. I don't know, you're independent. You've always been fine. You don't need the money. You're not going to be alone, you know?" It was like a slap in the face. I felt a rush of heat flood my chest, my vision narrowing. My heart started to pound, but I didn't back down. "You don't get it," I snapped, my voice rising. "I don't want to be treated like I'll always need a man to take care of me." I could feel the anger building, the frustration that had been simmering for days now boiling over. "You're acting like just because I'm independent now, I'll always be fine." I took a deep breath, my voice shaking, but I forced it to stay calm. "You have no idea how crushing it is. To be told that all my hard work, everything I've done to get here, doesn't matter. Because someday, someone else will handle it for me." There was a silence on the other end, but it wasn't the silence of someone trying to understand. It was the silence of someone who just didn't get it. Matthew wasn't hearing me. "I mean," he said after a beat, "it's Dad's decision. What can we do? We're just following his wishes. You'll be okay. You always have been." I could feel my blood boil. He was dismissing me again, brushing me off like I was overreacting, just like Jake had done. "No," I bit out, almost through gritted teeth. "You don't understand. You don't get that this is about more than just money. It's about how I've been treated my whole life. And now, after everything, you're telling me that my worth is based on who I might marry?" Matthew sighed, his voice a little more defensive now. "I know it's messed up. I do. I didn't think about it that way when I saw the will, but I don't know what you want me to say, Delilah." I was done. The emotional weight of the last few hours had taken its toll, and I couldn't hold back anymore. "I want you to see me, Matthew. I want you to see how hurtful this is, how unfair. But clearly, you don't care enough to even try." I heard him take a deep breath, like he was about to say something else, but I didn't want to hear it anymore. I didn't want to hear any more excuses or justifications for something that wasn't just wrong, it was hurtful. "Stay out of my life, Matthew," I said, each word a little sharper, a little colder. "If you can't understand why this matters, then I don't need you pretending to care. Just leave me alone." I didn't even wait for him to respond. I hung up the phone so hard it almost hurt my hand. I stood there in silence, feeling the coldness of the moment settle in. That was it. I couldn't rely on anyone in my family to understand. They didn't get it. They couldn't, and maybe they never would. I sank into the couch, my heart pounding as I felt more isolated than ever. In that moment, I didn't know if I wanted to scream or cry or both. My brothers, both of them were out of touch with me. And what hurt more was realizing that even when they said they did care, it wasn't enough. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect. It was about recognition that I was my own person. A person who deserved to be treated equally, who deserved to be seen for what I was, not what someone else thought I would become. After that phone call with Matthew, I was done. Or at least, I thought I was. My mind was spinning with all the ways I'd been disrespected, overlooked, and dismissed by my own family. It was like I was invisible, like I was a footnote in everyone else's story. I sat down in my apartment, staring at my phone, feeling the weight of everything. I had nothing left to say to my brothers. They didn't get it. I couldn't force them to see it. But as angry as I wasn't ready to just let it go. I couldn't. Not when everything was still so unfair. Not when I felt like I had been erased from my own family's future. So, I did what I could. I started researching. I went online, I read through forums, I reached out to legal advisors, and I even looked up family law. If they weren't going to listen to me, I would find a way to make them. Maybe I could contest the will. Maybe there was a loophole, something I could use to force them to divide things properly. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about showing them how wrong they were. How wrong Dad was. But as I scrolled through page after page of legal jargon, I found myself getting more and more tired. I just wanted someone to see me. I just wanted my brothers to hear me. Every article I read felt like a slap in the face. The sense of betrayal weighed on me like a 100-pound stone. I couldn't believe that in 2025, my own father had treated me like I was lesser than my brothers. I didn't need a man to provide for me. I didn't need anyone's charity. And yet here I was fighting to even be recognized as an equal. But something shifted over the next few days. I didn't hear from Jake or Matthew. There were no texts, no apologies, nothing. But then, I started hearing things through the grapevine. Family friends, some distant relatives, they started reaching out to me. The same people who'd never had anything to say about our family's dynamics were suddenly making little comments about how wrong the situation was. How unfair it was that my brothers didn't even question Dad's decision. A few of them had even brought it up to my brothers directly. And it made me feel seen. For the first time in days, I wasn't just a victim of my father's will. People were talking, and it was getting through to Jake and Matthew, too. It started off slow. At first, I could tell my brothers were still defensive. They'd brush it off when someone mentioned the will, laughing it off or changing the subject. But over time, I noticed something. They started listening. They were starting to feel uncomfortable. My brothers, the ones who had once shrugged it all off as no big deal, were now shifting their stance. They were getting the message, just not directly from me. I wasn't there to see it, but I knew that the seed of doubt was planted in them. I could almost feel it. The guilt started creeping in. They had never thought about how this affected me. They'd always been the ones to benefit. By the time I spoke to Jake again, there was a noticeable change in his tone. He didn't come to me and apologize outright, but there was something different in the way he spoke. He was still defensive, still making excuses, but the excuses were weaker. The confidence in his voice was fading. He texted me one afternoon, "I've been thinking about it. I guess Dad wasn't really thinking about you when he made the decision. I didn't realize how much it hurt you. I'm sorry if I made you feel dismissed." I couldn't believe it. My heart tightened. I had to reread it a couple of times. He didn't outright say he was wrong, but that small, tentative acknowledgement, it was progress. The kind of progress I'd been waiting for. Matthew didn't reach out right away, but a few days later, he gave me a call. I answered, expecting another half-hearted apology or more defensiveness. But instead, he said, "I've been thinking too, Delilah. I get why you're hurt, I see it now. I didn't understand how much it affected you until I really thought about it. And I'm sorry, I really am." It was the first time he sounded genuinely regretful. He wasn't just parroting something he thought I wanted to hear. There was real emotion behind his words. But I wasn't ready to forgive just yet. Not fully. I needed to make sure they understood what they were apologizing for. I didn't need them to just say the words. I needed them to own it. "I appreciate your apology," I said slowly, "but this isn't just about words, it's about actions. It's about recognizing that I deserve more than just being treated like I'm nothing." They were still defensive, still a little reluctant to admit how deeply their father's decision had affected me. But they were listening, and that was enough for now. As much as I was still angry, I knew that something had shifted. They weren't the same people who had taken the inheritance without a second thought. They were starting to realize their mistakes, and that was all I needed for now. It wasn't like my brothers came rushing to apologize after that last conversation. It wasn't like they suddenly realized how wrong they were and jumped on the phone to make things right. No, it didn't go down like that. But something changed in them over the next few days. They didn't come to me, but I started hearing little bits of things from family and friends, and even their own social media posts. The guilt had started to sink in, and I could tell. What happened next came from them talking to each other. I don't know how it all went down, but I know for sure that the realization was growing. They were processing, even if it was quietly. A few days after my last conversation with Matthew, Jake pulled me aside. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there for a moment, looking like he had something on his mind but didn't know how to start. Finally, he broke the silence. "You know, I've been thinking a lot," he said, his voice almost hesitant. "I didn't think it was a big deal at first. Honestly, I just figured Dad was in charge, and it was what it was. But, it's really eating me up now. We need to fix this." His words hit me like a wave of cold water. I didn't expect him to come to me directly like that. The realization in his voice caught me off guard. But I didn't let myself feel relief just yet. I needed more from him than just this half apology. I nodded, trying to hold back the mix of anger and relief bubbling up in my chest. "It's not just eating you up, Jake, it's eating me up. I'm not some helpless person waiting for someone to save me. I'm a grown woman, and this. This is just about Dad's sexist ideas being passed down to you too without a second thought. Jake rubbed his forehead, looking frustrated with himself. I know, he said. I didn't think about it that way, but now that I do, I see how much pain it's caused you. I see it now. His words weren't perfect. I still wasn't sure they fully understood the weight of the hurt, but at least he was trying now. He wasn't dismissing me like before. Then, Matthew walked in, his face tense, like he'd been holding this all in. I heard you, Jake. And honestly, I've been thinking about it, too, he said, taking a seat across from me. It's been messing with me, too. I didn't get it at first, but it's been gnawing at me. The way Matthew said it like he was admitting to something he'd been avoiding made me feel like the ground had shifted. It wasn't just about words anymore, it was about real reflection. They were both feeling it. I didn't get how deep this ran, Matthew admitted, rubbing his hands together nervously. How much we hurt you. And it's not just the money, it's how we've treated you. We let this whole thing happen without even thinking about you. Dad's decision. It's been tainting our relationship with you, I can see that now. There it was. That was the first time either of them had really acknowledged how their actions were affecting me, how much this was really about our relationship, not just about money, but about respect. Jake sighed deeply. I just kept thinking, it's Dad's decision, it's not a big deal. But I see now how much it hurt you, and how much we've made it worse by not thinking it through. I was shocked, honestly. I hadn't expected them to get it, at least not this quickly, but they were. They were starting to get it, slowly, but they were getting there. We need to fix this, Jake continued, his voice more certain now. We can't just leave it like this, with everything hanging between us. Matthew nodded in agreement. We've caused enough damage. I'm not okay with it anymore. And I think we need to do something. We need to figure out a way to make it right. They both looked at me, waiting for my reaction, and I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to throw my hands up and say, you should have done this sooner, but I didn't, I couldn't, they were trying. And for once, it felt like they were doing more than just apologizing, they were acting. Okay, I said, my voice steady but cold. So, what are you going to do about it? Jake glanced at Matthew. We're going to meet with a lawyer. Find out how we can fix this. How we can divide it equally. I'm not going to just sit here and act like everything's fine anymore. Matthew nodded, his expression serious. We'll make it right. We'll get it sorted. And just like that, something changed. The way they were speaking, there was no defensiveness left, no more trying to justify things. It was like they finally understood that the damage had been done and that they had to own it, not just apologize and move on. I didn't trust them completely. Not yet. But this was the first real step towards something better. They were ready to make it right, and I wasn't about to stop them now. A few days passed since that conversation, and I was still reeling from everything. The tension in the air was thick, like everything between me and my brothers had changed in a way I didn't know how to undo. But they had promised to meet me again. They'd promised they'd make it right. And that was the only thing keeping me from walking away for good. I didn't expect it to go smoothly. I didn't expect them to suddenly have the perfect words or the perfect apology. But I knew I had to at least hear them out. It was a Sunday afternoon when they called to set up the meeting. They wanted to meet at a small cafe, some neutral ground, I guess. I agreed, not knowing if I was ready to face them again, but I wasn't going to back down. Not now. When I walked into the cafe, I saw them sitting at a table in the corner. They looked, and different. There was no smugness, no defensiveness, just two young men looking guilty. They both stood up when I walked in, and for the first time, I didn't feel like the one who had to make the first move. Jake spoke first. He was almost stumbling over his words. Delilah, I don't know how to start, but I want to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. His voice was shaking a little, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen him so vulnerable. Matthew's eyes met mine, and for once, I didn't see that same defensiveness in them. There was guilt. We've messed up, Delilah. And we didn't see how deep this all ran until you made us really think about it. Dad's decision wasn't just wrong, it was hurtful. And I see that now. They both looked like they were carrying the weight of their actions. It was strange, honestly. I'd never seen them like this, sincerely remorseful, acknowledging how much they'd messed up. Jake continued, his voice quieter now. I didn't realize what I was doing, what we were doing. I thought I was just going along with what Dad wanted. But now, I know how wrong it was, and I'm sorry. There was no defensiveness, no excuses, just the weight of what they'd done, and it hit me harder than I expected. I had to fight back tears. I had spent so many days feeling like I was invisible to them, like my pain didn't matter. And now, here they were trying to make it right. Matthew took a breath, looking right at me. We know we can't undo what's been done, but we can fix it. We'll divide the estate equally. No questions asked. It's not about the money, it's about doing what's right. The moment was charged, emotionally thick. I could feel the sincerity in their words. I could hear it in their voices. But as much as I wanted to forgive them, a part of me just couldn't shake the hurt. I can't just forget what happened, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's not about the money, it's about how you both saw me. How you didn't even question Dad's decision. You just accepted it. I took a deep breath, letting the frustration seep out. You never saw me, you never saw how much this hurt me. There was a long pause, and I could see them grappling with my words. I wasn't ready to forgive, not yet. But for the first time in a long time, I could see my brothers trying to understand. Delilah, Jake said, his voice quieter now. I see it now. I really do. I was blind, and I'm sorry for that. You deserve better. You deserve to be treated equally. And we didn't give you that. Matthew nodded. We can't change the past, but we can change the future. And we'll fix this, Delilah. We'll make it right. They were both looking at me with sincerity. I still wasn't ready to forgive everything that had happened. But in that moment, I felt something shift between us. I'm not doing this for you to feel better, Jake, I said, a little sharper than I intended. I'm doing this because you two need to know what you did. You need to see how this broke me. Matthew looked at me with regret in his eyes. We see it now, Delilah, and we'll fix it, I swear. I nodded slowly, still feeling that nagging sense of betrayal hanging in the air, but something in their tone told me they meant it this time. I wasn't ready to forgive them completely, but I didn't have to. This was a step in the right direction. Okay, I said, standing up from the table. We'll move forward, but remember this, remember how much you hurt me. You can't take that back, but you can make sure it doesn't happen again. I could see the remorse on their faces, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was being seen. But it wasn't over. Not yet. It felt surreal. After everything that had happened, after the anger, the confrontation, the long days of trying to make them see me, I was finally sitting in the lawyer's office with Jake and Matthew. The weight of the entire situation hung in the air, but something had changed. The brothers were quieter than usual, more serious, as we all waited for the lawyer to explain what we could do next. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with a calm, professional demeanor, sat across from us, flipping through some paperwork. He cleared his throat and looked directly at me. So, as it stands, the estate distribution as it's currently written is legally binding. However, there are options available to you. If the parties involved agree, it can be adjusted through a legal process. We'd file for a modification of the will. I could feel my heart rate increase. It was finally happening. There was a way to fix this. The lawyer continued explaining the legal steps, how we would all need to sign off on the change and how a judge would likely approve the adjustment given the circumstances. Matthew glanced at Jake, and I saw at the moment the weight of their actions hit them both. They were quiet, thoughtful, like they were truly processing the situation for the first time. The guilt, the embarrassment, they couldn't hide it anymore. Are you both okay with this? The lawyer asked, looking at Jake and Matthew. This isn't something you can take back once it's done. You'll be splitting the estate equally. There was a brief silence. I wasn't sure what was going through their minds, but I saw the tension in their eyes. This was the moment, the real turning point. The moment where everything they'd done, everything they'd dismissed, would be made right. Jake spoke first, his voice low. Yeah, he said, his words coming out slowly. We need to do this. Matthew nodded, looking over at me. We messed up, Delilah. And we can't change that. But we can fix this. It's the right thing to do. It was like they had finally come to terms with everything. It was no longer just an apology. It was action. They were owning up to what they had done, and they were ready to make things right. The lawyer made some notes and looked up at us, his face serious but supportive. I'll start the paperwork. If everyone's in agreement, we can move forward. The estate will be divided equally between the three of you. We signed the papers, and I felt a strange weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just about the money, honestly, it was about the principle. It was about the fact that I was finally getting my fair share, not because they had to give it to me, but because they finally saw that I deserved it, that I wasn't invisible. When we left the lawyer's office, there was a quiet relief between the three of us. We didn't say much on the way home. It was like the heavy, suffocating tension that had been hanging over our heads for weeks had been momentarily lifted. But it wasn't gone completely. There was still more to work through. Still more healing to do. I looked at Jake and Matthew, both of them looking a little different. They had a weight on them now, not from guilt, but from understanding the cost of their actions. The small decision to accept the inheritance without question had affected all of us in ways I couldn't even explain. But now, they were seeing it. They were seeing how something that seemed so insignificant to them had turned our family upside down. Thanks, I said quietly, my voice steady but filled with a kind of exhaustion I couldn't shake. They nodded, their expressions still a mix of regret and understanding. Delilah, Jake said softly, I know this doesn't fix everything, but I'm glad we did this. We needed to. Matthew added, yeah, it was the right thing. We're sorry for what we put you through. The apology was more than I'd expected. The words weren't just words anymore, they were actions. They were showing me that they were trying, that they were willing to face what they'd done. And as we all went our separate ways, the tension remained, but it wasn't the same. I had my fair share. We had an agreement. The legal side of things was done. But the emotional weight was still there. For now, though, I felt validated. I wasn't just the ignored daughter anymore. I wasn't just a piece of furniture in my family's life. I was seen, and that was enough for now. But I couldn't help but think about what came next. We'd moved forward with the inheritance, but had we really fixed everything? I still wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if the damage had been undone or if we were just learning to live with it. It's been a few weeks since everything was sorted. The money has been divided equally, as it should have been from the start. Jake and Matthew are doing better, or at least, that's what I tell myself when I think of them. But I'm still left with a heavy feeling in my chest, one that doesn't quite go away. Maybe it's the realization that no matter how much we try to fix things, sometimes the damage has already been done. And sometimes, those lessons come too late. I still remember how it felt to get that phone call from the lawyer, the relief that flooded my chest when they confirmed the estate could be adjusted. But it's not the money that sticks with me now. It's not the change in the distribution, or the fact that I'm now receiving what I'm owed, what I've earned. It's the emotional cost, the realization that my brother's actions, even if they were well-meaning, were steeped in ignorance and privilege. They were just two young men, following what they thought was the path laid out for them. They never stopped to think about how their actions would affect me. How my life had been shaped by this kind of thinking, by being told that my independence didn't matter, that my worth would be defined by someone else, that I wasn't a priority. The guilt I saw in their eyes now is real, but that doesn't change how much pain it caused. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on this, maybe more than I should. I've spent hours questioning myself. Should I have spoken up sooner? Should I have known that I wasn't invisible, that I was worth fighting for? I thought I had it all together, that I didn't need validation from anyone else. But when I found out about the will, it felt like my entire identity had been erased. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that I've learned something through this. It wasn't about the inheritance. It wasn't even about the money. It was about understanding what really matters: relationships. Jake and Matthew, for all their mistakes, have learned something, too. They've paid a price not in monetary terms, but in the way they now understand how easily their actions can hurt someone else. How their privilege kept them blind to the struggles I've faced, even within our own family. It's easy to think everything is fine when you've never had to fight for what you deserve. It's easy to sit back and accept what's handed to you. But now, they see what it costs to not see me. I can't undo the hurt that I felt. I can't forget how it felt to be dismissed, to be treated like I didn't matter. But I can move forward. And in a way, I think my brothers are doing the same. They will carry the burden of their actions, of course. It's not something they'll ever forget. But maybe that's the lesson they needed. Sometimes, the lessons come too late, but that doesn't mean they're not worth learning. I'm not angry anymore. I don't feel the rage that used to boil inside me every time I thought about what Dad had done, or what my brothers did by accepting it. There's a peace that's settled in me now, a quiet understanding that the money was never the point. It was about my voice being heard. It was about me standing up for myself when everyone expected me to quietly accept my place in the background. And now, things are different. We've moved past it. My brothers and I are still figuring out how to navigate this new chapter, but I know that I can stand tall and not apologize for taking what's rightfully mine. My father's legacy isn't just about money anymore. It's about the way we treat each other, the way we recognize each other's worth, even when it's hard. So, as I walk away from this chapter of my life, I don't hold on to bitterness. I don't let resentment weigh me down. I just hope that my brothers will carry with them the lessons they've learned. And if they do, then maybe, just maybe, we can all move forward with a little more understanding, and a little more respect. Kicked out at 19, blamed for a theft. 4 years later, my grandfather exposed their lies, and I became the heir to everything they tried to take. My father kicked me out on Christmas Eve for something I did not do. I constructed a life without him and believed I had left everything behind. However, my family's lies and greed came tumbling down years later. Before we get there, let me start from the beginning. My name is Liam Carter, I'm 23. And tonight, I'm heading back to the place I promised I'd never visit again. 3 years ago, my family booted me out on Christmas Eve. I'm traveling home today to celebrate my grandfather Edward's 72nd birthday. This is the first time I'll see my folks and Rachel since that night. The roadway is vacant. The sky was scarred with winter clouds, and as I come closer, my chest feels heavier. I'm not the same 19-year-old kid anymore. I'd constructed a little e-commerce firm, gained independence, and established a life outside them. However, no amount of achievement can soften the blow of treachery. The house was in pandemonium long before that night. My mother, Vanessa, was preoccupied with looks. Perfect decorations, banquets, and falsehoods. Rachel, my sister, was the golden kid. Spoiled, theatrical, and spiteful, as only siblings can be. If I breathed incorrectly, she mocked me. If I remained silent, she labeled me worthless. Vanessa constantly supported her. My father, Gregory, was a formidable attorney who intimidated judges and annihilated opponents. But at home, he remained mute. Instead of establishing limits, he let them to run the show. If Vanessa claimed I was lazy, he would agree. If Rachel had said I was a disappointment, he turned away. I learned to live around them rather than with them. I spent the most of that December immersed in scholarship applications, brainstorming ideas for a little internet company that I hoped would get me out of the house. Late at night, while everyone else was asleep, I'd sneak into Gregory's office to print paperwork and conduct research. It was the only establishment with a functioning printer and a reliable Wi-Fi connection. Christmas Eve dawned frigid and brittle. The tree in the corner was shining. The home was filled with the aroma of cinnamon and pine. Vanessa was in hostess mode, shouting instructions and cleaning wine glasses as if the Pope was arriving for dinner. Rachel strutted about in a fashionable coat she had requested as a Christmas necessity, taking pictures in front of the fireplace. I kept out of the way, attempting to help where I could while counting down the hours until the day was over. Gregory then beckoned me into the living room. "Where is it?" His voice was not elevated, yet there was something threatening about it. "Where's what?" I inquired, puzzled. "My watch," he said abruptly. "The Rolex GMT Master 2 is white gold. The one your grandpa gave me when I became a partner. $40,000, Liam. It's gone." I blinked. "I know nothing about it." Vanessa laughed sharply and without humor. "Of course not. That is always your answer. Acting as if you're too preoccupied with your small projects to notice anything." "I didn't do anything," I said. "I have been." Rachel cut in. "Don't lie. I spotted you at Dad's office last week, beside his drawer, presumably plotting something." "I was printing a scholarship application," I explained, my voice tense. "I did not touch anything." Vanessa folded her arms. "The ideal representation of mock worry. You have been creeping about for weeks. Desperate. Secretive. It is evident what you did." "What are they desperate for?" I inquired, fury coming in. "You've never cared about what I do. You simply want someone to blame." Gregory moved closer, hovering over me. "This is not about assigning blame. That watch means more to me than you would ever realize. And now it is gone. I did not take it." My voice cracked from frustration. "I didn't realize it was gone until now." "Liar." Vanessa's voice was chilly. "You've been a disappointment from the moment you were born. This is only proof." Rachel gave a harsh chuckle. "I told you, Dad. He's probably attempting to sell it to support one of his fraudulent business ventures." That was it. Something inside me broke. "You have no notion what I'm trying to do," I replied, staring at them. "I'm trying to make something of myself. I'm striving to be better than this." Gregory's eyes hardened. "Do not raise your voice at me. You have embarrassed this family for the final time." "I didn't do anything," I said. "You are accusing me of something I did not do." Before I could continue, Gregory moved to his desk, opened the drawer, and took out the empty Rolex box. He tossed it across the room. It collided with the wall near me and landed on the floor. "Get out," he ordered, his voice low and firm. "Pack your things. Leave this house. You're not part of this family anymore." The Christmas tree lights flashed in the corner. Carols sounded weakly on the stereo. Outside, snow began to fall. In the midst of it all, my father stood there. Not as a guy I adored or admired, but as someone who had decided I was no longer worth claiming. I murmured, "You are making a mistake." Vanessa hissed. "Was it necessary to keep you here for so long?" Rachel grinned, arms crossed. "Merry Christmas." I didn't utter another word. I went upstairs, packed a single duffel bag with my clothing and laptop, and exited the front door. Before I even got to the driveway, the door closed behind me. The porch light flickered out, like if they couldn't stand to see me leave. It was Christmas Eve. I had $80 in my pocket, no place to sleep, and no one in the house cared whether I froze in the snow. That was the night everything ended. And that night, I promised they'd never have influence over me again. When I got to the end of the street, it was snowing heavily. The lights from my house gleamed warmly behind me. Muffled Christmas music is slipping through the walls. A celebration that I was no longer a part of. My hands were numb, and the duffel bag's straps dug against my shoulder. The cold was harsh. But it wasn't what hurt. What stung was that they did it tonight, on Christmas Eve. Every home I passed like a postcard. Families gathered at dinner tables. The children tore into their presents. Through the frosted windows, I saw smiles, laughter, and warmth. I felt like a ghost passing through someone else's life. My breath became foggy in the air, and each intake burned. I wasn't sure where to go. I glanced through my phone and messaged Sam, a student with whom I had completed a few group assignments. Got booted out. Is there any way I may crash tonight? He responded within minutes. Come by. His family resided in a little townhouse on the opposite side of town. My shoes were completely saturated by the time I arrived, and my fingers were stinging. Sam opened the door, wearing a Santa hat and bringing a dish of cookies. Behind him, his family was gathered in the living room to watch a Christmas movie. The fragrance of roast turkey and cinnamon permeated the air. Man, what happened? He inquired. Long story, I mumbled. Can I just crash on the couch? Of course, he responded, standing back. His parents came moments afterward, cordial, yet suspicious. Liam, right? His father inquired. Rough night? Something like that. They allowed me in, but I could sense their unease. They chatted in hushed tones when they thought I couldn't hear. I ate the meal they offered, but their gaze kept traveling to me. A stranger in the middle of a holiday. As they exchanged gifts, I sat silently on the couch, looking at the floor. It was nicer than the cold outside, but it wasn't home. I departed the next morning before anyone was up. I texted Sam to thank him and tell him I would work things out. The weeks that followed blended together. I went from one friend's couch to another. 3 nights here and 4 nights there. I am always careful not to overstay my welcome. Initially, many were sympathetic. They supplied food, blankets, and counsel. But sympathy does not stay long. By the 2nd or 3rd week, the indications began. We'll be having family visits shortly. I need my space back. By the middle of January, I had run out of places to stay. The temperature had plummeted below freezing, and the cold pierced deeper than I'd ever felt before. I spent evenings in bus stops, public libraries, and even behind a gas station, huddled up with my duffel bag as a cushion. I missed meals to make the money I had last longer. I applied for part-time work, but due to my lack of experience, most employers rejected me before I ever had an interview. 2 weeks after being forced out, I decided to return to the house, not to speak with anyone, but to get my old laptop from the garage. It was my only resource for scholarship applications and job searches. I waited till dusk, thinking nobody would see me. They did. Before I could reach the side door, a police cruiser drove into the driveway. Officer Hayes went outside, his breath apparent in the cold. You Liam, he questioned. Yeah. Your mother says you're trespassing. I'm not. I used to live here. I just came to get my laptop. How old are you? Questioned Hayes. 19, he moaned. Technically, they're still responsible for you. But if you don't want to go back, I'm not going to drag you inside. I'll flag CPS and try to reach a relative. Just don't come back here. They're not going to change. I just need what you need, lightly interrupting, is to stop trying to fix something that's already broken. If you want a future, you build it without them. He released me from any charges. I never went back. A week later, I was seated in the public library, using a free computer, when a woman touched my shoulder. I turned around and for a few seconds didn't recognize her. Beatrice is my father's older sister. I hadn't seen her for over 5 years. Officer Hayes obtained my phone information from a previous report and phoned me as soon as he could, she added. Told me what had occurred. I knew your parents were selfish, but they were tossing you out on Christmas Eve. She shakes her head. You're coming with me. Beatrice had always avoided Vanessa and Rachel, calling them snakes in designer shoes. When she found out I was on the streets, she came to the library where I had been spending my days and gave me a place. It wasn't charity. Beatrice made it obvious. If I stayed, I'd have to carry my own weight. Within a week she had found me a part-time work at a tiny car repair. The task was demanding. Long hours, oil beneath my nails and sore muscles. But I did not complain. It was a lifeline. I began saving every penny. A month later, I paid a few hundred for a dilapidated, hardly functioning second-hand automobile. It wasn't a lot, but it was mine. And most significantly, it provided a roof when I needed it. When Beatrice's extra room was unavailable or I had late shifts, I would park behind a 24-hour grocery shop and sleep there. The grind became my habit, with garage shifts. During the day and delivery work at night. During breaks, I taught myself coding and digital marketing using free online classes. Every harsh remark Vanessa and Rachel made online about their trips, lavish dinners, and family Christmas photographs added fuel to the flames. Rachel once wrote, "The house feels lighter without dead weight." She intended it as a barb. I took that as incentive. By spring, I had saved enough money to start a tiny e-commerce business. It hardly sold, but it was a start, demonstrating that I could construct anything. A few months later, I received a prestigious technical scholarship. It seemed like the first true win I had ever achieved on my own. Months later, while returning after a delivery, I went by my former neighborhood. The houses were once again illuminated, and music spilled onto the street. I paused across from my family's home. The windows were illuminated, and laughing echoed from within, the same warmth I'd seen from outside. I paused for a while before zipping my jacket and walking away. They decided to kick me out. I decided never to return. 4 years later, I returned to celebrate Grandpa's 72nd birthday. The invitation astonished me. I hadn't communicated with most of my relatives since the day I left. My father never reached out. Vanessa and Rachel pretended I don't exist. But Edward was different. Even after I left, Dad sent birthday cards, sometimes even checks, and a handwritten message when I received my scholarship. He was the only person who treated me like I still mattered. I knew I couldn't say no when his card arrived with a handwritten letter saying, "I'd like you there. Please come." When I arrived, the driveway was already crowded. Vanessa liked mentioning expensive automobiles in her chats. The home appeared precisely the same. Same porch light, wreath, and pleasant warmth from the windows. Nothing had changed except for me. I parked down the street and sat in my car for a while to steady myself. Then I stepped outside, fixed my jacket, and approached the door. When I went inside, the cacophony hit me. Laughter, clinking drinks, and music coming from concealed speakers. As I passed, a few relatives whom I hardly recognized nodded politely. Others gazed as if they had seen a ghost. Vanessa spotted me first. Her smile disappeared. "Well," she remarked, holding a wine glass. "Look who decided to show up." "Good to see you too," I answered calmly. Rachel followed, dressed head to toe in luxury brands and wearing a phony grin. "I was betting you wouldn't have the nerve," she told me. "I guess I owe Mom $20. I ignored the jibe and sought for my father. Gregory was standing by the fireplace with a drink in his hand, deep in conversation with one of Edward's friends. He looked up, saw me, and his expression faltered for a second, then he gave a stiff nod. Nothing more. The tension in the room was thick, but I kept my head up. I wasn't the kid they'd humiliated anymore. Olivia, Edward's attorney and oldest friend, yelled behind me. "I'm glad you came." "Wouldn't miss it," I responded. She lowered her voice. "Edward's been working on something. Don't leave before the toast." I nodded, not sure what she meant. I spent the next hour avoiding conversations. Vanessa introduced Rachel to anyone who would listen as an up-and-coming entrepreneur, despite the fact that I knew from social media that her influencer projects were failing. My father pretended I wasn't there. Every time I passed them, Rachel's voice rose just loud enough for me to catch a word. Pathetic. Still bitter. Probably unemployed. I didn't take the bait, and I focused on the reason I was there, Edward. It was nearly 9 a.m., when the clinking of a spoon against a glass silenced the chatter. Edward stood at the head of the long dining table, his posture straight, his voice strong. "Thank you all for coming," he began. 72 years is a long time to be alive, and I'm grateful to have so much family here tonight." He paused, scanning the room, then his tone shifted. Slower, heavier, deliberate. 3 years ago, something valuable went missing from this house. A Rolex GMT Master 2, white gold, $40,000. My son's watch, which my grandson Liam was accused of stealing. Vanessa's smile faded as I spoke with an old friend who runs a pawnshop downtown, and he froze when I mentioned the watch, despite the fact that he had been thrown out and disowned. Recently, his voice tightened, and I discovered the truth. He told me that just after Christmas that year, a young woman came into his shop with a matching piece, nervous, shaking, and talking too much. A ripple of unease spread across the room, and Rachel's hands tightened around her glass. I showed him a photo of the missing watch, Edward continued, and he didn't hesitate. The same model, serial number, and engraving. And the name on the paperwork? He paused, allowing the silence to stretch. Rachel Carter. The room erupted in whispers. Vanessa's face drained of color. Gregory's hand trembled as he set his drink down. Rachel stared at the floor, frozen. We traced the serial number to the current holder using his records. After the police contacted them, the watch was returned. But I didn't stop there, Edward continued, pacing slowly as if presenting evidence in court. I wanted the complete story, so I asked for help, and we traced the money, which was routed to a debt collector to pay off a boyfriend's gambling issue. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, and while all of this was going on, Edward said, his voice rising slightly. Another $10,000 was spent on a European vacation, first-class flights, 5-star hotels, champagne brunches, and $9,000 was lost in a cryptocurrency scheme that failed in weeks. The person you all chose to blame, the one you called a liar and a thief, was trying to survive with nothing. Liam lost his home, his family, and 3 years of his life because of a story you all never questioned. Liam, you were innocent. You always were. The room was silent. Vanessa's lips moved, but no words came out. Gregory stared at the table, unable to look at me. Rachel's eyes were glassy with amazement, and her face was pale. I felt a dozen eyes on me, but I didn't say anything because I didn't need to. The truth had been buried for 3 years, and now it was naked in the center of the room for everyone to see. I remained long enough to softly thank Edward. Then I slipped out before dessert, the cold night air hitting me like a wave. I didn't want to see the fallout. I didn't want apologies. The people inside that house had already shown me who they were, and as I walked down the driveway, I realized something had changed. For years, I'd carried the weight of their betrayal like a chain. But now, as snow crunched under my boots and the house faded into the distance behind me, I felt lighter. They had tried to bury me with lies. But tonight, the truth dug me out. I hadn't heard from my father in 2 days after Edward's party, and then the messages began, at first full of apologies. Against my better judgment, I texted Gregory an address, and he accused me of turning Edward against him, brainwashing the family and humiliating them in front of their friends. I ignored every single one of his desperate texts about how he didn't know the whole story, that he regretted everything, and that he wanted to make things right. When I walked into the small cafe near the old library where I used to study, he was already there, sitting at a corner table with a half-finished cup of coffee. He looked tired and older than I remembered, but there was still that same intensity in his eyes. The same man who had thrown me out on Christmas Eve was sitting in front of me as if nothing had happened. Liam, he began, standing as if we were old friends. I appreciate you coming. Let's just speak, I said, taking a seat. There was a long silence before he spoke again. I owe you an apology. His voice was low and measured. I was wrong about the watch that night, and a lot of other things. I didn't answer because I wanted to hear what else he had to say. I thought I was doing what was best, he continued. I believed what they told me, and when I saw you in my office, I let my anger take over. I failed you as a father. For a moment, I almost believed him, but then his tone shifted, subtle at first, then sharper. But you have to understand, he said, leaning forward. I was under a great deal of pressure. I had Vanessa in one ear, Rachel in the other, and I didn't know what to believe. And now you've gone and turned my own father against me. Do you have any idea what that toast did to me? The words hit me like a slap. What it did to you, I repeated. It told the truth. That's what it did. He exhaled sharply. You didn't need to make it public. You could have handled this privately. Instead, you humiliated me. Humiliated our family. Our family? I scoffed. The same family the Liam, I'm trying to fix this. No, I said. You're trying to fix how it looks. There's a difference. The conversation shifted quickly from calm to confrontational. He slammed his palm lightly on the table. You have no idea what it's like to have everything you've built fall apart because of one mistake. I lost clients. Friends stopped calling. People think I'm a fool. You are a fool, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. You believed a lie because it was easier than believing me, and now you're paying for it. Watch your tone, he snapped, the old authority creeping back into his voice. No, I said quietly. I'm done watching my tone. You kicked me out like trash and let them destroy my name. You didn't even respond to my messages when I begged you to hear me out, and now that the truth is out, you're still trying to blame someone else. The silence between us was sharp, and people at nearby tables began to glance over. Gregory looked around embarrassed, then leaned in. I'm asking you to move on. We are still family. We can rebuild. Family, I insisted. Family protects you. The family listens. Family does not throw a 19-year-old out on Christmas Eve without proof. His voice hardened. You're being theatrical. I already apologized. No, I said, standing now. You said you were sorry you got caught. I'm not sorry for what you did. He got up, his cheeks heated. You think you're better than me now? Because Edward's giving you money because you got a few scholarships. I don't think I'm better than you, I replied. I just know I'll never be like you. Something in his eyes shifted, anger, pride, maybe even fear. But he didn't stop. One day you'll regret this. One day you'll realize how much I sacrificed. I stared at him for a long time before answering. You didn't sacrifice anything. You threw away your son. I turned and walked toward the door. He called my name, but I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I stood outside the cafe for a few minutes, the winter air biting at my face. I should have been angry, but instead I felt clarity. My father hadn't come to apologize, he'd come to rewrite the story. He wanted forgiveness without accountability, redemption without consequences, and for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't owe him anything. I took out my phone and blocked his number, and the cycle was broken. 2 weeks had passed since the cafe confrontation, and I had not heard from my father since the day I walked away. But then Edward called, his voice calm, but there was something deliberate beneath the surface. I need you to come by the house, he said. There's something we need to talk about privately. I drove over the next morning, not knowing what to expect. He greeted me at the door with a firm handshake and led me into his study, which smelled of old books and cedar and was lined with decades of family history. On the table in front of him were several folders, each thick with documents. What's all this? I asked. Evidence, he replied, and a very big problem. Edward explained that after the truth about the watch was revealed, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more beneath the surface. The way Vanessa and Rachel had manipulated my father so easily, the way they lied without hesitation, had left him unsettled, so he began digging. Over the course of 2 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars had quietly vanished from company and personal accounts. It all started with a review of the family company's financial records, which initially appeared to be in order. Then, inconsistencies began to emerge, with small withdrawals here and unaccounted transfers there. Vanessa had been issuing company credit cards in her name, charging them with business expenses such as designer handbags, spa treatments, and private chauffeurs, as well as funneling company funds into side ventures, failed influencer projects, expensive vacations, and even a short-lived clothing brand that failed in months. And that wasn't the worst of it. Edward opened another folder and handed a paper across the desk. A hefty loan agreement taken out in Gregory's name, but the signature wasn't his. Forged? I asked, and Edward nodded. Your mother signed it. She used the money to bail Rachel out of a failed cryptocurrency scam. Edward leaned back and added something that caught me off guard. They hadn't just destroyed trust. They had been bleeding the family dry while blaming everyone else for their mess. $500,000 had disappeared in a single night. And you once asked me why Rachel ever pawned the Rolex in the first place. If they were capable of stealing so much, why bother? I nodded, the question gnawing at me. Because that happened before all of this, Edward said. At the time, they didn't have access to company accounts. Vanessa wasn't a part of the business yet, and Rachel didn't know how to move money without getting caught. They needed fast, untraceable cash, and they needed it immediately. He flipped another page showing bank statements. Her boyfriend was deep in debt, not credit card debt, but the dangerous kind, with loan sharks and threats. They needed tens of thousands of dollars within days. The company funds were too risky to touch at the time, too many eyes, too much paper trail. But your father's. How about my father? I asked quietly. He's ignorant, Edward said. Or maybe he decided not to see it. In any case, he let them go wild, and now they've nearly destroyed all I created. I leaned back in the chair. What are you going to do? Edward's visage darkened. I'm cutting them off. All of them, he said literally. Over the next hour, he laid out his plan. His lawyers were already restructuring the family trust. My father's name was being removed as a beneficiary. Every asset, real estate, shares, bonds would bypass him entirely, and the money that was supposed to sustain him in retirement would be gone. Vanessa and Rachel would not smell a thing. They had their opportunity, Edward continued, and they demonstrated they couldn't be trusted with our family's heritage. I didn't know what to say. It was a major choice, not just a punishment, but a definitive judgment. There's one more thing, Edward said. I'm setting aside a portion of the estate for you. Not because you deserve it, but because you earned it. You've shown integrity when everyone else around you has shown greed. I shook my head. I didn't do any of this for money. I know, he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. That's exactly why you deserve it. The fallout was immediate. Within days, word spread that Edward had rewritten his will, and Vanessa was furious. Rachel spiraled. Her cards were stopped, her accounts depleted, her projects crumbling, and she wrote me a long rambling letter online one night screaming for assistance. She phoned Edward's attorney several times, threatening litigation, but none of it mattered since the documentation was airtight. Even after I blocked him, he kept calling from new numbers, leaving dozens of missed calls and voicemails that ranged from rage to desperation. In one, he shouted that I had turned Edward against his own son, and in another, he begged me to talk. I deleted it without responding. In less than 2 weeks, Edward phoned again. It's done, he stated simply. The trust is finalized. They're shut off. I asked how my father reacted. He's outraged, Edward said. But he still doesn't understand why this is happening. He blames everyone but himself. Vanessa is discussing divorce, while Rachel is drowning in debt. A week after Edward signed the trust, the shockwaves began. At first, nothing obvious changed, just a shift in tone when my father's name was mentioned. Calls were no longer returned, meetings were rescheduled, and people he once called friends suddenly became too busy. It was the kind of silence that always comes before everything falls apart. Within 2 weeks, the first cracks appeared. When word of the trust changes reached the firm and whispers spread throughout the legal community, an internal audit was called routine, but everyone knew why it was happening. Investigators dug into records and soon enough patterns began to emerge. Forgery, unapproved transfers, and missing funds. Vanessa's name was linked to embezzlement, and an investigation into Carter Holdings was launched, revealing every detail of their scheme. By the second month, the situation had exploded, with the media catching wind of it and making brutal headlines. Rachel's influencer brand was exposed as a shell corporation, and my father's reputation, established over decades, was wrecked in days. The firm suspended him awaiting an inquiry, state regulators began a case, clients broke links, and former mentors refused to answer his calls. In the third month, Edward's lawyers began the process of reclaiming the family home, which would take time but was unavoidable. Creditors called on a daily basis, accounts were frozen, sponsorships disappeared. Rachel's projects failed one after the other, and Vanessa's carefully curated image crumbled. By the 5th month, humiliation had become public. When the eviction notice arrived, Rachel absolutely lost it and raced onto Edward's property, shouting that he was ruining the family. Edward listened attentively before cutting her off with a single sentence. The family does not fabricate signatures. Families do not empty accounts or frame their own blood. This is the result of your choices. The house went on the market weeks later. Rachel's luxury SUV was repossessed, Vanessa was photographed shouting at debt collectors, and the pictures went viral. Rachel tried one last time to salvage her image. Vanessa filed for divorce in the 6th month after launching a second chance rebrand online, crying on camera about growth and learning from mistakes. Her sponsors and followers vanished, and she quietly deleted everything. She accused Gregory of emotional neglect and betrayal, hoping for a payout, but Edward's lawyers had sealed every loophole, the accounts were frozen, the trust was untouchable, and there was nothing left for her to win. Gregory's professional life was also over. No firm would hire him. His name was toxic, and the man who once preached control now had none. He left me a voicemail, which I never answered. She left, he said quietly. I gave them everything. I listened once before De Gregory, stripped of wealth and reputation, was living alone in a small run-down apartment. I saw him once by accident in a grocery store, and he looked older and smaller, as if the weight of every decision he'd made had finally caught up with him. He tried to speak, but I kept walking, and there was nothing else to say. When we spoke, Edward seemed lighter. It was hard to watch, he conceded one afternoon. But sometimes the only way to stop rot is to let it collapse under its own weight. He was correct. None of us had destroyed them. We had not required to. They'd done it to themselves, one selfish choice at a time. Their demise was neither loud nor dramatic. It was slow, embarrassing, and conclusive. And for the first time since I was 19, I was no longer furious. I was free. Life following their demise was calm, almost unsettlingly so. For the first time in years, there were no furious messages, manipulation, or guilt-tripping. Just silence. And in that stillness, I began to create a life separate from them. I disconnected from all points of communication, changed my phone number, stopped reading the old email, and informed family that I did not want updates. It was not about vengeance. I really didn't want their disarray to flow into the future I was attempting to build. Work became my primary focus. The degree I had worked so hard for finally paid off, and I rose fast through the ranks of a cybersecurity business. I oversaw projects, recruited my own staff, and got the respect I had previously asked for. Every milestone seemed like confirmation that I had created something wholly on my own. I too went, not to escape, but to survive. From the temples of Kyoto to the mountains of Patagonia, each new location reminded me of how far I'd gone since that night. I sat in my chilly vehicle on Christmas Eve. The youngster who had previously had nowhere to go was now crafting his own tale. Edward and I became closer. He wasn't just my granddad anymore. He was my anchor. We frequently discussed the future of the family company. And for the first time, I became a part of that future. They tried to break you, he informed me one evening. But you built yourself stronger than they ever were. A letter arrived about a year later. It came from my father. I was really taken aback by the penmanship. Inside he confessed everything: betrayal, deceit, blindness, and the words I never imagined I'd hear. I'm sorry. He wrote about Vanessa's remarriage and then departed without saying anything. Rachel seldom communicated with him. How empty my life had become. He stated he wished he could go back and alter everything. I read it twice and then put it aside. I did not react. Not because I loathed him, but because I no longer required anything from him. No apologies, no talk, no connection. I'd already forgiven him, in my own way. Forgiveness was not for him. That was for me. That winter, Edward and I held a little holiday meal. Beatrice arrived with cousins and a few close pals. It was a lovely, laughter-filled evening, just like the ones I used to fantasize of when I was younger. Beatrice raised her glass and exclaimed, "Here's to second chances, the ones we give ourselves." Her words stuck with me. My tale was never about vengeance. It was about rebuilding after being broken. It was about establishing that their decisions did not shape who I became. I haven't spoken with my father since the letter. Maybe someday I will. Perhaps I won't. If I do, it will be my decision, and not his. The youngster he tossed out on Christmas Eve has vanished. What remains is a guy who established a life without their consent. Who realized that family is about commitment and love, not blood. And that man, whom they attempted to destroy, is now free. My mom used my card without permission to pay for a $5,800 family vacation. I filed fraud charges, and they called me selfish. My name is Lucas, and I am 28 years old. I was leading a prosperous life as a software engineer until last week, when my phone lighted up with a text message from my brother Ryan. "Send me your card details." Dad said, "You're paying for our Christmas trip." I instantly answered, "That's not happening." The next morning Mom messaged, "Don't be dramatic. I already used your old card information. The payment went through." My stomach fell as I saw my account. If you're viewing this tale, tell me in the comments how you'd respond if your family did anything similar. Don't forget to subscribe to avoid missing similar stories on creating boundaries with toxic family. My parents' names are Thomas and Catherine. My younger brother Ryan is 29, and my sister Olivia is 26. From the outside, we probably appear like any other American family. But, behind the surface, there has always been a worrisome relationship, particularly in terms of finances. Growing up, I rapidly realized that financial independence was the only way ahead. While my siblings had continual support, I was frequently informed that I needed to sort things out on my own. At 17, I was working practically full-time at a local grocery shop while retaining honor roll status. When college applications arrived, my parents nonchalantly informed me that they had not saved money for my education. "You're smart, Lucas. You'll get scholarships," my father remarked, as if that answered everything. I did obtain partial scholarships, but they paid less than half of my tuition. I took out student loans for the remainder and worked 2 jobs throughout college. Meanwhile, Ryan failed out of his first year, and my parents just paid for him to start over at another school. When Olivia decided she wanted a car for her 19th birthday, they purchased a new Honda without hesitation. After earning a computer science degree, I got a job at TechFear, a growing technology business in the city. Over the last 8 years, I've advanced to the position of senior software engineer, where I oversee development teams on crucial projects. My 1-bedroom downtown apartment isn't fancy, but it's pleasant. And until recently, I had been saving for a down payment on a home. My connection with Ryan has always been tense. He has never worked for more than 5 months and has filed several complaints regarding management and working conditions. Despite this, he lives an extravagant lifestyle, with designer clothes, the latest iPhone, and regular evenings out at posh bars. He's borrowed money from me on several times, making vague promises of payback that never materialized. Come on, bro. You make good money. What's $500 between brothers? Was his normal response whenever I mentioned past overdue debts. My friendship with Olivia has minimally improved. She at least recognizes my efforts and occasionally expresses thanks when I assist her. However, she is greatly affected by Ryan and frequently sides with him when disagreements arise. My parents' favoritism was never disguised. Family gatherings inevitably contain several reminders about Ryan and Olivia's difficult lives, followed by not-so-subtle suggestions that I should be doing more to help. When I bought a new laptop when my old one died, my mother said, "Must be nice to spend money on yourself when your sister needs help with her rent." I've tried setting boundaries before. 3 years ago, after lending Ryan $2,500 for emergency car repairs that mysteriously transformed into a vacation to Miami with his girlfriend, I told my family that I wouldn't be providing any more financial assistance without clear terms and repayment plans. This declaration was met with accusations of selfishness and a 2-week silent treatment from my mother. Family helps family, my father lectured during a tense phone call. It's exhausting, demoralizing, and, as recent events have shown, potentially devastating to both my finances and mental health. It was Tuesday evening around 7:30 p.m., and my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. I almost ignored it, having learned that messages from my brother usually resulted in stress or financial requests, but habit forced me to check anyway. "Hey bro, I need your card information as soon as possible. Dad stated you would pay for our Christmas trip this year. Need to book tonight for the discount." I stared at the screen, wondering if this was some kind of joke. Without any prior discussion, they had somehow decided I would fund a family vacation. I typed back a simple response. "What are you talking about?" His response was immediate. "The Hawaii vacation for Christmas." Mom and Dad responded, "You owe them for everything they did for you growing up, and you already make the most money. Just provide your card information." As I read his message, my pulse quickened, and I responded firmly, "That is not going to happen. Nobody has addressed anything with me, and I have not committed to pay for anything." Ryan wrote 3 dots, then disappeared and returned, saying, "Don't be such a selfish jerk. It's $5,800 for all of us. You can afford it with your lucrative work." I took a deep breath before responding. I'm not being selfish by refusing to pay for an expensive trip nobody consulted me about. Dad's already told everyone we're going. I felt a familiar mix of guilt and anger rise in my chest, despite the fact that the manipulation was so obvious. Ryan's comments were increasingly aggressive. "You constantly do this. Act as if you're better than us because you have money. We're a family, and you've been so busy at work recently. We knew you wouldn't plan the vacation in time for the discount. I didn't forget anything because I never agreed to this trip in the first place. Well, it's finished now. We depart on December 23rd. I will email you the itinerary." The conversation proceeded in this cyclical manner, with my mother refusing to admit any guilt. When I considered canceling the payment and reporting it as fraudulent, her tone changed considerably. "You'd do that to your own family after all we've done for you? Your father will be furious," as if on cue. My father phoned 20 minutes after I finished up with my mother, and he didn't bother with niceties. "What's this bullshit about you dropping out of the trip?" Thomas demanded. "Your mother is in tears, Dad. I've never agreed to pay for any trip. Using my card without authorization constitutes theft. Theft. We raised you, fed you, put clothes on your back for 18 years, and this is how you repay us by threatening your own parents. That does not give you the right to my money for the rest of my life, I protested, attempting to maintain a steady voice despite the emotion mounting in my throat. You have changed, Lucas. That employment has made you feel superior to your family. You have forgotten where you came from. The debate continued to escalate until my father issued an ultimatum. Fix this or don't bother coming around anymore. Throughout the day, my phone was continually buzzing with Ryan's texts, each one more aggressive than the last. Way to spoil Christmas, jerk. Mom is sobbing because of you. I hope you're happy. I always knew you were selfish, but this is a new low. Olivia also called, with a gentler tone but the same message. Lucas, I understand that's a lot of money, but it would mean so much to everyone. Mom and Dad aren't growing younger. Don't you want us to enjoy a lovely family Christmas? When I told her that using my card without authorization was unlawful, she sighed. You are being very detailed about this. They are our parents. They changed your diapers and such. By the evening, extended family members had joined the fray. My Aunt Barbara called to express her disgust, and 2 cousins wrote notes asking what type of person could destroy their parents' Christmas. An uncle I hardly communicated with shared a vague Facebook status about ungrateful children, which earned likes from several family members. The pressure was unrelenting, and I couldn't focus at work the next day, making thoughtless mistakes that my team leader noticed. During our afternoon meeting, I missed a vital question concerning the project deadline, eliciting worried stares from colleagues. My hands shook slightly as I typed, and the 3 hours of sleep I'd managed the night before made coherent thought increasingly difficult. The weight of expectation, guilt and anger pressed down on me, and beneath it all lay a profound sense of betrayal from those who were supposed to love me unconditionally. By Thursday morning, I had reached my breaking point. After another sleepless night, I contacted my credit card company as soon as their customer service was available. I need to report an unauthorized charge, I said the representative, my voice remarkably firm despite the agony inside. After detailing the scenario, the person expressed sorrow and uncertainty. Sir, are you suggesting that your family members used your card without your permission? Do you wish to register a fraud claim? I hesitated briefly. Yes, I would. The agent led me through the procedure, and said that the charge would be temporarily reversed while an investigation was conducted. She further stated that in circumstances of blatant fraud, the credit card company may be forced to report the occurrence to police. You may need to file a police report, she explained. Especially for a charge this large, the thought of potentially involving police in a family matter made my stomach churn, but I completed the fraud claim anyway. The financial breach was too enormous to overlook, regardless of who had perpetrated it. Less than an hour later, my phone rang, and it was my mother, her voice screaming with wrath. I'm Lucas James Marshall, what did you do? The resort just contacted to say our payment has been refused and reported for fraud. I took a big breath. Mom, I told you I didn't agree to pay for the vacation. Using my card without authorization is fraud. How dare you, she hissed. After everything we've sacrificed for you, your father worked 2 jobs to put food on the table when you were little. That doesn't give you the right to take money from me without asking. We did not steal anything. We are family. Family members share obligations. Mom, I pay all of my own bills, rent and expenses. I've helped out several times when requested. However, this is not like the others. $5,800 without even consulting with me first. Catherine's voice became frigid. Do you know what this is about? It's about you believing you're better than us today. With your expensive degree and your IT career, you've forgotten what family is. The argument went in circles, with my mother alternating between guilt trips, accusations, and threats. Your father is furious, he responds. If you don't fix this by tonight, you shouldn't bother coming to Thanksgiving next month. When I didn't immediately cave to this ultimatum, she responded. Do you truly want your connection with your family to end on this hill? A trip that is easily affordable. After finishing the call with my mother, Thomas moved on to my father. He didn't bother with subtle deception. He plunged right into wrath. You've shamed this entire family, he said. The resort thinks we're criminals now. Your mother is beside herself. Dad, I understand. You pay attention when I speak. You're going to phone the credit card company right now and inform them the error. Then you'll apologize to your mother, brother and sister for this juvenile act. When I declined, his voice lowered to a frightening silence. Then you're not my son. Do not call. Please do not visit. Do not anticipate anything from us ever again." The call went dead. I remained immobile, his words reverberating in my ears. Despite the turmoil in our relationship, hearing my father disavow me hit a deep chord. Ryan's reaction was predictable, violent. Throughout the day, my phone received a torrent of texts. "I hope you are proud of yourself. Mom had been weeping all morning. I knew you were selfish, but this is next level. Dad says he does not want to see you again. Nice work, genius." Olivia called that evening, using a more cautious approach yet eventually conveying the same point. "Lucas, I get that you're upset they didn't ask first," she told him. "But canceling the payment and filing fraud charges, that's extreme. Using someone's credit card without permission is extreme, Olivia." "But we're family," she said, repeating our mother's words. "Couldn't you have talked to them first?" "I did talk to them. They refused to admit they did anything wrong, so now everyone's furious, Christmas is destroyed, and Dad says, 'You're not welcome at family gatherings anymore.'" The pressure increased as extended family members joined the cause. Aunt Carol called to remind me that family is forever and that money comes and goes, but you only get one mother and father. Uncle Phil sent a lengthy email about respecting one's parents, quoting liberally from the Bible, despite our family's general lack of religious observance. Cousin Rachel, with whom I'd been close as a child, sent a disappointed text. "I can't believe you do this for money. I always thought you were better than that." Even my grandmother, who rarely intervened in family disputes, left a voicemail urging me to make peace with your parents before it was too late. The isolation was overwhelming, and every conversation and message painted me as the villain, the ungrateful son who valued money over family. My team leader, Marcus, was concerned when I made uncharacteristic mistakes at work, and no one seemed to recognize or acknowledge the violation of trust, the complete disregard for my autonomy. As a result of the stress, I developed a persistent headache that painkillers couldn't alleviate, and my appetite disappeared. "Is everything okay, Lucas? You appear distracted this week." I mumbled something about personal issues and promised to focus better, but my productivity continued to suffer. During a critical client presentation, I fumbled basic information about our project timeline, forcing Marcus to smoothly intervene and correct me. That night, alone in my apartment, I stared at my phone, which was full of accusatory messages, and felt a crushing weight of doubt. Was I overreacting? Was $5,800 worth destroying my relationship with my entire family? The questions circled endlessly, robbing me of sleep and peace. But beneath the doubt and guilt lay something else. Simmering anger at being manipulated once more, and a growing certainty that if I gave in this time, the boundary violations would only escalate in the future. The following Monday, I received an email from my credit card company confirming that the charge had been permanently reversed. A separate paragraph caught my attention. Based on the information provided and the size of the unauthorized transaction, we are required to report this incident to our fraud department, which may involve local law enforcement contacting the merchant to investigate potential fraudulent activity. My gut squeezed. I had not planned for this to develop to serious legal implications, but I also couldn't rationalize withdrawing the fraud claim. What my relatives had done was, by definition, credit card fraud, regardless of our blood link. I hadn't heard from my parents in 2 days, which was rare amid family fights, but that afternoon, my mother called, her voice shaking with wrath. "The police came to our house today, Lucas." "What about the police?" "They questioned us about credit card theft. Your father had to explain to cops on our front porch that it was simply a miscommunication over a family trip." My pulse accelerated. "I do, Mom. Do you have any clue how embarrassing this was? What your neighbors must think. This is your way of saying thank you for everything we've done." "By sending police to our door." "I didn't send police anywhere." I attempted to explain. "The credit card company must have." "Don't attempt to avoid accountability. This is your doing. You could have addressed this inside the family, but you had to involve others," she said, her voice rising. "Your father cannot even look at me. He feels mortified that his own kid would do this to us. We have dedicated 30 years of our lives to raise you, and this is our reward." When I eventually managed to explain that using my credit card without authorization was prohibited regardless of familial relationships, she laughed. "Oh, listen to Mr. Law and Order. Lucas, who paid for your health appointments when you were unwell as a child? Who drove you to soccer practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 8 years? Who stayed up to help you with your science fair projects?" This time around, the traditional guilt techniques felt hollow and deceptive, rather than convincing. That's what parents should do, Mom. That is parenting. I am not alone in my interest. How dare you? She gasped. You ungrateful selfish. She trailed off, clearly too outraged to continue. Before disconnecting up, she landed her last hit. Don't bother phoning during Thanksgiving or Christmas. You are no longer welcome in this family. My father broke his quiet by sending a single text message, and the consequences was fast and crushing. Your mom is distraught. I've never been more disappointed in someone in my life. Ryan turned to social media, tweeting vague but sharp accusations directly at me. Amazing how some people forget where they came from once they get a little money. Ryan followed up with a lengthy post in our extended family Facebook group, which I rarely checked but remained a member of, detailing a completely distorted version of events. He claimed that I had promised to pay for a modest family getaway and then called the cops on Mom and Dad when I changed my mind. The post elicited scores of sympathetic and furious responses from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all weighing in on my character and obvious moral flaws. Olivia, caught in the middle as usual, contacted that evening. Lucas, this has completely gotten out of hand, she said, her voice exhausted. Mom is talking about amending her will. Dad is telling everyone you attempted to get them arrested. That's not what happened at all, I insisted. I understand, but can't you just pay for the trip? It would make everything go away. I understand it is a lot of money, but is it worth losing your family for? Her inquiry struck a chord with me because it exposed a fundamental imbalance in my family's perception of our relationship. They saw my primary value as money, a resource to be used rather than a person to be valued. It's not about the money anymore, Olivia. She groaned. It's about boundaries and respect. Well, everyone is taking sides, and it is unpleasant. Thanksgiving will be a nightmare if this is not fixed. Am I even invited to Thanksgiving anymore? I inquired, already knowing the answer. Not technically, no, she explained. But if you fix this, I terminated the conversation quickly, emotionally drained. That night, my best buddy Ryan called, worried after viewing Ryan's social media posts. Dude, what's happening with your family? Your brother's posts are wild. I detailed the scenario, letting out a flood of fury and anguish. For the first time, I disclosed the entire history of financial manipulation, frequent guilt trips, and double standards between myself and my siblings. Ryan listened without interrupting, then simply stated, Lucas, this is not normal. What they did was a crime, and now they're upset with you for not allowing them get away with it. His clear evaluation pierced through the cloud of shame and doubt I had been living in. You know, Emma and I always do Thanksgiving at our place, Ryan said, referring to his wife. You are invited to join us. No credit card theft is required, he said, trying to lighten the atmosphere. His simple act of goodwill, offering alternative Christmas plans, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. The next day, I hit my breaking point. The combination of restless nights, professional stress, and continual family pressure resulted in a panic attack at a team meeting. I excused myself immediately, fleeing to a toilet stall where I battled to breathe properly, my heart beating as if I'd just completed a marathon. Marcus followed, waiting outside until my breathing settled before suggesting I take the rest of the day off. Whatever is going on, Lucas, it has a major impact on you. Take care of yourself first. The project will still be around tomorrow. I drove home in a haze, the weight of the situation weighing down on me. For years, I'd accepted the position assigned to me by my family. The dependable provider, the safety net, the one who would finally give in. The pattern had been formed for so long that breaking it felt like ripping my own skin. But as I sat in my lonely apartment that afternoon, Ryan's comments resounded in my head. That's not normal. Was it conceivable that my entire foundation for family ties had been fundamentally disrupted, and that what I had accepted as typical familial responsibility was actually something altogether different? With trembling hands, I opened my laptop and entered financial abuse in families. The findings left me chilly. The articles and resources that appeared on my computer outlined patterns of conduct that were eerily similar to how my family treated me. Financial exploitation, emotional blackmail, and poisonous family dynamics were among the terms that stood out on page after page. I spent hours reading personal accounts from people who had been in similar situations, adult children whose families saw them primarily as financial resources, whose boundaries were constantly violated, and whose attempts to establish independence were met with emotional manipulation and guilt. One essay. Breaking the Cycle. recognizing and responding to financial abuse by family members, stood out. The author noted how financially abusive families frequently utilize emotional power to extort money, depicting fundamental limits as selfishness and parental care as an unending obligation. According to the essay, typical parental obligations are retrospectively changed into debts that cannot be fully repaid, transforming the parent-child relationship into a transaction. For years, I had misinterpreted my dissatisfaction with my family's financial expectations as a personal flaw. The realization was both terrible and freeing. Evidence that I was indeed the selfish, resentful person they accused me of being. Now I was confronted with the prospect that my instincts had been true throughout. The next morning, I phoned in sick to work for the first time in over a year and made an emergency appointment with Dr. Franklin, a therapist whose contact information I got through my company's employee assistance program. Dr. Franklin's office was simply furnished but cozy, with soft lighting and no apparent clocks, which I noted right away when I checked the time on my phone before silencing it. "Tell me what brings you in today, Lucas," he said after we finished the introductory paperwork. The entire narrative spilled out, not only the recent credit card issue, but years of financial exploitation, double standards amongst my brothers, and the continual assumption that I would act as the family's financial safety net without inquiry or thankfulness. Dr. Franklin listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions but largely allowing me to express myself. When I finished, he leaned slightly forward. "What you're describing is a clear pattern of financial abuse," he added, verifying my late-night investigation. "Your family has systematically violated your boundaries and used emotional manipulation to control your financial resources." Hearing it expressed so clearly by a professional was startling. "But they're my family," I murmured softly, repeating the justification that had held me bound for so long. "Yes, they are," Dr. Franklin said. "That connection should be based on mutual respect, not exploitation. Being related does not enable someone to access your funds without your permission." We spent the remainder of the session talking about healthy boundaries and differentiation, which is the act of establishing yourself as independent from your family of origin but yet retaining acceptable connections. "How would it look?" Dr. Franklin inquired at the end. "What if you decided that your financial resources were entirely in your control, and that you could share them, or not based on your own values and preferences rather than familial pressure?" I couldn't respond right away since the thought felt alien and nearly taboo. "That's your homework," he said softly. "Consider what healthy financial boundaries could look like for you. We'll talk about it more next time." The next day at work, I bumped into Jessica from the marketing department in the break room. We'd worked together on numerous projects and had a nice professional relationship, so I was shocked when she inquired if I was all right. "You seem really stressed lately," she told me. "I hope you don't mind me mentioning it." Perhaps it was the sheer generosity of her care, or maybe the emotional dam had already broken, but I found myself telling her a shortened version of my family situation. To my amazement, Jessica nodded with quick comprehension. "My mother was the same way with me for years," she told me. "There were always emergencies that only I could address. With money, of course." "How did you handle it?" I inquired, anxious for practical guidance. Jessica's expression became serious. "I had to go entirely cold turkey. It was the most difficult thing I'd ever done, yet every time I gave up, it only reinforced the pattern." She highlighted how, 3 years ago, she finally established hard financial boundaries, which caused many months of family conflict, but eventually led to better balanced relationships, or, in certain cases, the required distance from relatives who couldn't accept her boundaries. "The guilt is the worst part," she explained. "They're experts at making you feel like the bad person for saying no to unreasonable demands." Her experience was so similar to mine that it seemed like validation I wasn't overreacting or misinterpreting the circumstance. If Jessica was able to overcome comparable obstacles, maybe I can as well. Over the next week, I continued my research and reflection. I examined my financial records for the past 5 years, tallying the loans and gifts I'd given to family members. The total, nearly $28,000, shocked me. That amount would have completed my house down payment fund with money to spare. More importantly, I reflected on Dr. Franklin's question about what healthy boundaries would look like. I understood that in a healthy family connection, financial assistance will be 1. Gently requested rather than commanded. 2. Discussed honestly and not assumed. 3. Real appreciation, rather than being considered as a duty. 4. Reciprocal where feasible, not always one-sided. 5. Outstanding, not routine. None of these requirements occurred in my existing family situation. During my second session with Dr. Franklin, we discussed the concept of family of choice versus family of origin. He explained that sometimes the healthiest thing we can do is build stronger connections with people who respect our boundaries. This doesn't necessarily mean cutting off your biological family, but it could mean investing more emotional energy in mutually supportive relationships. The idea struck a deep chord with me. In recent days, friends like Ryan and Emma have given me more real care than my family has in years. Jessica has offered empathy and solidarity based on her own experience, and Marcus at work has showed more concern for my well-being than my own parents. I think I need to stop the cycle, I told Dr. Franklin. But I'm afraid of the fallout. That's a valid fear, he said. Changing established family arrangements frequently elicits strong opposition, but consider this. The pattern is already harming you. Your mental health, financial stability, and self-esteem. The short-term pain of change may be worth it in the long run to develop stronger connections. As I left his office, I felt a rising sense of certainty. The decision ahead would be difficult, but continuing as things were seemed increasingly impossible. That evening, I wrote in my journal, attempting to articulate what I truly desired from my family relationships. Not money, not control, but simply respect and recognition of my autonomy. Was it really too much to ask? The answer seemed apparent, and it came with a sense of resolve. The cycle of financial exploitation and emotional manipulation had to be broken, and I was the only one who could do it. After careful consideration and another session with Dr. Franklin, I decided to address the situation head-on. Rather than continuing the cycle of reactive phone calls and texts, I would clearly communicate my position and boundaries. I spent an entire evening drafting an email to send to my parents, Ryan and Olivia. I revised it multiple times, working to make it firm but not vindictive, clear but not cruel. Dr. Franklin had advised me to focus on my own feelings and boundaries. The final version reads, "Dear Mother, Father, Ryan and Olivia, I'm writing to discuss what occurred during the Hawaii vacation and to explicitly convey my boundaries for the future. Using my credit card without my authorization was a major violation. It was not only upsetting, but also unlawful. The fact that we are relatives does not justify accessing my finances without my clear authorization. This is not a single instance, but rather part of a long-term pattern. When asked, I've supplied financial assistance several times, frequently at the expense of my own financial objectives and security. These contributions have historically been viewed as responsibilities rather than gifts, with little recognition or appreciation. Moving ahead, these are my boundaries. 1. I am responsible for managing my money resources. I'll determine when, how, and whether I disclose them. 2. I will not contribute money until we have a clear understanding about whether it is a gift or a loan. Loans will have agreed upon payback conditions. 3. I will not react to money solicitations that include emotional manipulation, guilt trips, or the suggestion that I owe my family infinite financial assistance. 4. I intend to keep my personal financial information secret and safe. Using my payment information without authorization will result in my taking suitable precautions to protect myself. These restrictions are not intended to penalize somebody or be selfish. They want to develop a healthy connection based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. I love you all and want to go forward with a greater knowledge of each other's needs and boundaries. I am still open to renewing our connections on these better conditions. Lucas. I hesitated before hitting send, knowing that this email would most likely elicit strong reactions, but the alternative of continuing the dysfunctional pattern seemed unbearable. I took a deep breath and sent the message to all 4 family members at the same time, and the responses came quickly and predictably. My father responded first. "How dare you lecture us about family relationships? Your mother is crying again. You definitely prioritize your precious money over the folks who reared you. Maybe we can chat when you realize what happened and apologize." My mother's reaction was longer, but it included similar emotions interwoven with recalls of sacrifices they had made during my upbringing and allegations about my personality. Her last words were, "I don't know who you've been talking to that's put these ideas in your head, but this is not how we raised you to treat family." Ryan was unsurprisingly nasty. "I knew you were selfish but had no idea you were also a horrible jerk. I hope your money keeps you warm at night because you recently lost your family." Only Olivia's remark included any subtlety. "I realize you're unhappy about the credit card issue, and it was probably not appropriate, but don't you think this email is a little extreme? Maybe we could chat in person instead of establishing all these rules for our relationship." Dr. Franklin had advised me that my family would likely reject my limits at first, viewing them as a danger to the established dynamic that benefited them. In the days that followed, the pressure increased. My parents urged other family members to reach out, each expressing variations on the same message. I was unreasonable, selfish and ungrateful, and I was tearing the family apart over money. I had to apologize and remove my requests. Aunt Barbara called, her voice full of disappointment. "Your mother is very heartbroken, Lucas. I've never seen her like this. Is this truly the type of son you want to be?" Cousin Michael sent a lengthy text stressing that family should always come first, regardless of the circumstances. Uncle Phil emailed Bible texts on respecting one's parents. Even my grandmother, who is typically detached from family fights, left a voicemail questioning why I was generating so much fuss over something so insignificant. The onslaught was precisely what Dr. Franklin predicted. They'll mobilize the entire family system to pressure you back into your assigned role. I maintained a simple, consistent response to each communication. Stay firm in your conviction that healthy boundaries are not only reasonable but also necessary. I love you and want a healthy relationship, but I need my boundaries to be respected. At Dr. Franklin's recommendation, I joined a support group for individuals dealing with challenging family connections. The first meeting was revelatory, a room full of people whose stories resembled mine. Some had successfully created boundaries with their families, while others were still battling. But all recognized the complicated emotions involved in reframing family connections as an adult. Martin, a guy in his 40s who had minimal contact with his financially exploitative parents for several years, provided particularly useful insight. They're used to seeing you as a resource rather than as a person with legitimate needs and boundaries. When you challenge that perception, they see it as a threat to their entire worldview. Lisa, whose experience with her brothers closely resembled mine with Ryan, continued. The most difficult aspect for me was understanding that my family might never support my decision. Instead, I had to find approval inside myself, and from my chosen family. The notion of chosen family remained popular. Ryan and Emma invited me to their home for dinner several times, creating a warm, pressure-free environment that contrasted sharply with the tension of family gatherings. Jessica and I began meeting for coffee on a regular basis, our shared experiences laying the groundwork for a growing friendship. Even at work, I found unexpected support. During a one-on-one discussion with Marcus, I quickly recounted my family circumstances, and he revealed that he had limited contact with his own father for similar reasons. "Some people will never understand maintaining boundaries with family," I heard him say. "They'll remark, 'But that's your mother,' or 'blood is thicker than water,' as if it excuses any action. You do not owe anyone an explanation for defending yourself." As Thanksgiving came, Ryan upped his social media campaign against me, publishing thinly disguised insults and gaining supporting responses from family members. Rather of confronting him directly, I silently unfollowed him, decreasing my exposure to the negative. Instead of obsessing on my exclusion from the family Thanksgiving, I concentrated on Ryan and Emma's invitation to a Friendsgiving for those who couldn't be with their families for various reasons, including distance and circumstances like mine. "Bring whatever dish you want," Emma said as we confirmed the plans. "Our home is your home." The mere compassion of that phrase, the absence of any duty or manipulation, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. In the meanwhile, Olivia did something unexpected. She texted me one evening. "I've been thinking a lot about your email. Some of what you've stated makes logic. Ryan and Mom are still quite furious, but I was wondering if we might discuss just the two of us sometime." We met for coffee the next weekend, and while the discussion was initially difficult, Olivia eventually opened up. "I've been watching how Mom and Dad treat you versus me and Ryan," she told me. "There's a double standard. They've always asked more from you, but provided less support." She recalled how, while I had paid my own way through college, our parents had covered not just her tuition, but also her apartment rent and auto expenses. "I guess I never questioned it because it benefited me," she said gently. Though she did not fully support all of my boundaries, her acknowledgement seemed like a huge breakthrough. We parted with tentative plans to meet again, independent of the larger family drama. As the holiday season continued, I felt both loss and discovery. The loss of established customs and familial ties was sad, regardless of the instability in those relationships. But as the constant financial pressure and emotional manipulation receded, I discovered a growing sense of peace. For the first time in years, I checked my phone without dread, knowing it wouldn't contain new financial demands disguised as family emergencies. I slept better, and my performance at work improved as the persistent stress decreased. Most significantly, I came to appreciate my own value beyond what I could contribute monetarily for others. As Christmas arrived, Ryan and Emma invited me back into their preparations. "We're hosting a few guests for Christmas Eve." "Nothing fancy," Ryan explained. "Emma's parents also invited us all to celebrate Christmas together." The contrast between this kind request and my family's insistence that I support their Hawaiian vacation could not have been more glaring. One respected my independence and cherished my companionship, but the other saw me as nothing more than a cash resource. In this atmosphere of respect and real concern, I felt something I hadn't felt with my own family in years. The simple delight of being valued for who I was rather than what I could contribute. Dr. Franklin had underlined that setting boundaries is usually a continuous process rather than a one-time occurrence. But for the first time, that road looked obvious and attainable. I was recovering not only my financial independence, but also my feeling of self-worth. 6 months have gone since the Hawaii vacation event, and my life has transformed in ways I never expected. The original crisis has turned into an unexpected path of development and self-discovery, and my financial situation has greatly improved because I'm no longer functioning as my family's emergency fund. I've restarted saving for a down payment on a house and have just started looking into houses in places I wouldn't have considered before. The ability to utilize my resources according to my own priorities seems both new and empowering. More significant than the financial improvements are the emotional ones. The constant anxiety that used to accompany every family encounter has decreased. I no longer shudder when my phone calls, expecting yet another catastrophe that can only be solved with money. The continual buzz of guilt has subsided, replaced with a growing trust in the validity of my limits. My connection with Olivia has progressed in unexpected ways. After our first coffee encounter, we talked on a daily basis, and our chats became more honest. She recently revealed that she had begun treatment herself, working through her own complex thoughts regarding our family relationships. "I never realized how much pressure there was to maintain the status quo," she told me over a recent lunch. "Since I've been questioning things more, Mom and Dad have started treating me differently too." She stated how our parents had become markedly colder to her after she refused to engage in their continual condemnation of me. "It's like they only fully accept you if you're playing by their rules," she told me. Olivia still communicates with our parents and Ryan, but our developing knowledge has allowed for a more genuine sibling connection based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. Thomas and Catherine have maintained that I am at blame, refusing to acknowledge the credit card event as improper. My father contacted around 2 months after everything transpired, not to reconcile, but to notify me that I was being removed from their will. "We've decided to leave everything to Ryan and Olivia," he said bluntly. "Since family clearly means so little to you." Despite his comments were intended to wound, I found myself strangely unconcerned. "That's your decision to make, Dad," I said quietly. "I appreciate your freedom to manage your finances any way you see fit. That is all I have asked for myself as well." My attitude puzzled him. He had anticipated rage or guilt, not this quiet acceptance. After an uneasy quiet, he ended the call. Ryan has continued to make sporadic social media jabs, though they have been less frequent. When Olivia revealed that he had lately lost another job and had moved back home with our parents, I realized what was most likely causing his ongoing rage. Without me as an additional financial resource, he is likely to feel more pressure to become self-sufficient. My chosen family has continued to grow and develop. Ryan and Emma have become essential players in my life, involving me in holidays, weekend activities, and everyday moments. Jessica and I are now good friends, meeting up for coffee or movies on a regular basis. Dr. Franklin's recommended support group has offered invaluable direction as well as some significant connections. Through these connections, I've learned what good relationships feel like. Mutual support, respect for limits, and the lack of continual calculation and duty. Dr. Franklin helped me see that my parents' behavior was most likely caused by their own unresolved issues and inadequate emotional tools, not willful malice. Understanding the source doesn't mean accepting the behavior, he underscored during one of our meetings. You can have compassion for their limitations while still protecting yourself from their harmful patterns. This viewpoint has allowed me to absorb the event without becoming overtaken by rage or bitterness. I do not resent my family for what transpired. I just acknowledge that their expectations and conduct were harmful, and that setting healthy boundaries is essential for my well-being. The most dramatic transformation has occurred within. I've abandoned the persona of the dependable family, ATM. the handsome son who would always give in, and the guy whose worth was solely assessed in monetary terms. In its place, I'm establishing a stronger sense of self based on my own beliefs and decisions, rather than outside expectations. I've discovered that genuine charity stems from freedom, not duty. When I recently donated to a friend's medical campaign, it felt very different from my past financial assistance for relatives. It was offered freely, without pressure or expectation, and resulted in true satisfaction rather than bitterness. I've realized that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for true relationships. By identifying what I will and will not tolerate and how others treat me, I open up the potential of friendships based on mutual respect, rather than exploitation. Perhaps most significantly, I've learned that families should be defined by how individuals treat one another, not only by biological relationship. The friends that helped me through this tough transition shown more real concern and respect than others who claim total ownership of my riches based on familial ties. As I continue on my road, I am aware that there may be hurdles. Family structures are resistant to change, and the desire to return to my previous position may re-emerge in unexpected ways. But I now have a better perspective, tougher limits, and a support network that encourages rather than hinders my progress. I advise anybody watching who is in a similar circumstance, contemplating if family financial demands have passed the line into exploitation, to trust their intuition. The discomfort you experience when boundaries are breached is understandable. You deserve relationships that are built on mutual respect, not one-sided obligations. Remember that setting limits isn't about punishing others, it's about fostering healthy relationships. Some individuals will respect those limits and stay in your life, while others may not. That consequence, however unpleasant, reveals fundamental realities about the nature of those connections. If my tale connected with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to set financial limits with family members? What obstacles did you confront, and how did you overcome them? Your insights may be useful to someone else who is dealing with a similar situation. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales on dealing with difficult family dynamics and personal growth. If you know someone who may benefit from hearing about this story, please pass it along. Thank you for hearing my story. I hope it provides comfort and strength to people experiencing similar circumstances. Remember that your worth is not determined by what you offer for others. And a genuine family, whether biological or chosen, should raise you up rather than deplete you. Sister destroyed my wedding dress, mocked me, and posted it online. It's just a dress, she said. Now, she's crying after seeing my wedding photos. My sister wore my wedding dress for her engagement picture session, so I banned her from wearing it. Since childhood, my older sister has been cruel to me. It seemed more like she loved upsetting me than playing with me. She'd conceal my favorite toys for days when we were youngsters, only to uncover them when I did her chores. She would borrow my new clothing without asking and return them with food stains or little rips. I saved my money for weeks to purchase scented markers, but she used them to draw on her notebooks before I could use them. She liked humiliating me in public. At school, she told my classmates I peed the bed when I was small. When I challenged her, she shrugged and said, I was just making conversation. By the time we were teens, she was a clothes thief. I saved for a good shirt, but she wore it to a party before I removed the tags. When I grumbled, she'd roll her eyes and remark, "You're so selfish. Clothes are meant to be worn, not hoarded." Our parents always said, "That's just how she is. Don't take it so seriously." I got married this year. Saved for months to buy my dream outfit. A long trained fitting satin gown with hand-beaded elements and a veil. It was my most costly garment, but it was worth it. To protect it, I stored it in a garment bag in my mom's spare bedroom closet. I went back on Saturday to check on it before my final fitting and found it gone. I froze. "Mom, did you move it?" She avoided eye contact and continued, "Your sister borrowed it for a photo shoot." I phoned her right away. All cheery, she replied. "Oh hey. Yeah, I took it. Don't freak out. It's just for a few days. I'm doing an engagement shoot with Ben, her boyfriend, and the dress was perfect." I raged. "That's my wedding dress. You were wrong." She chuckled and said, "Wow, calm down. I'll have it dry cleaned and it'll be better than before. You should be thanking me. It's going to be famous on Instagram." I begged her to bring it back immediately. She answered, "Relax. You're not getting married for 2 months. Stop acting like the world revolves around you." 2 days later, she emailed sneak peek images. My beach dress dragged in damp sand. Train was crumpled and hem black with grime. I told her she destroyed it. She said, "You're overreacting. It's just a dress. If you cared that much, you wouldn't let a piece of fabric ruin your day. My seamstress indicated some stains would never come out and some beads were gone. Devastated. However, my sister boasted that she would wear the dress to a big charity gala before my wedding since people would expect her to after seeing the images. I concluded it was all right if she believed it was a dress. Nowhere would she wear it. I informed my seamstress again. We planned. We made the outfit fit me better and not her. The waist was narrowed, the breast altered, and the hem reduced sufficiently to seem odd on taller people. We added tiny decorations that made it even more distinctive that my sister couldn't remove without destroying the outfit. A week later, I contacted her and said, "Sure, you can borrow the dress for your ball." She came over, arrogant, perhaps thinking she'd won. She entered my room, unzipped the clothes bag, and froze. "Did you change it?" I grinned, adjusted for my wedding. She tried it anyhow. Watching her struggle with the zipper was thrilling. She huffed, twisted and squeezed in, but it looked terrible. The waist was so tight she couldn't breathe. The bust seemed odd and the hem sat uncomfortably above her shoes. Her face reddened. "You sabotaged it." Grinned. "No. I made sure it fit me perfectly. You know, the person actually getting married in it." She demanding I pay for her ball gown replacement. I add, "It's just a dress. If you cared that much, you wouldn't let a piece of fabric ruin your night." She was silent, then yelled at me for being selfish and intentionally hurting her. I reminded her she took it without asking, dragged it through sand, and ignored my sentiments. The ball moved. She shared several photos in an old cocktail dress. My refurbished gown was beautiful for my wedding. After removing the stains and replacing the beads, it fit like a glove. At reception, she sat in the corner, sad. Till I picked up my wedding images from the photographer a week later, I believed she'd learnt. He confusedly gave me the USB device. He replied, "Your sister already came by last night asking for copies." My hands turned cold, and I stared at him as my brain processed what he said. Ethan looked between us, and cleared his throat before explaining my sister had stopped by around 9 o'clock yesterday night to get them while I was at work. The words hit me like icy water, and I grasped the counter to calm myself because Charlotte had done it again, taking something mine before I saw it. My voice shook when I asked if he had the files and could make me another duplicate now. Ethan nodded and pulled up the files on his computer as I stared with my heart racing. The loading shots were gorgeous. James and I threw out our first look, ceremony and reception, but Ethan scrolled through and I saw gaps. All bridesmaid preparation photos were missing. James and I took quiet shots alone, and even the cake cutting seemed incomplete. Ethan scrolled through quicker now, frowning as he compared his master list to the screen. He seemed embarrassed and told me Charlotte had instructed him to remove some photographs from my copy because they weren't flattering. Before I could think of what to say, I dialed her number with my phone. On the second ring, she responded with a cheery voice and started gushing about her new Instagram wedding planning account's photographs. Her announcement of her engagement and how everyone liked her first look images as wedding inspiration had me speechless. I heard Ben inquire if she received the other stuff, and she giggled before putting me on speaker. She said she'd had Ethan modify some images to switch our faces for fun to imagine her wedding day and display them to businesses around town. She said she'd been visiting my suppliers, using my identity to check on arrangements, saying she was picking stuff up or checking information, which made my stomach plummet. I hung up on her mid-sentence because my wrath was making it hard to breathe, then turned to Ethan, who was burning a fresh USB with all the data. After it was done, I grabbed it and hurried to my car, shivering so hard I lost my keys twice before opening the door. The journey to my parents' place was a whirl of red lights and stop signs that I scarcely saw, worrying about Charlotte's treatment of my suppliers. Mom answered the door before I knocked and defended Charlotte, claiming I was overreacting to a few images that sisters exchanged stuff. I pushed past her without answering and ran up the stairs to Charlotte's room, opening the door to discover my worst nightmare. My wedding images were printed and hung on every wall with comments, venue shots underlined in red marker, and floral arrangements labeled with vendor names and phone numbers. My secret Pinterest boards were printed too. She also wrote "booked" next to vendors with dates that fit my wedding timetable. My gut churned when I watched her mark certain things and write prices next to them, estimating event expenses using my exact selections. Behind me, car doors slammed and Charlotte's voice rose from below, laughing with Ben as shopping bags rustled. Charlotte emerged in the doorway with bags from my wedding dress store, where I got my veil and shoes, as they climbed the stairs. She brought out the veil I'd been eyeing for months, and the pearl-covered shoes I'd worn. Ben stood behind her feeling uncomfortable as she swung around asking whether they'd look nice with the dress, emphasizing the last two words like we knew which dress she meant. When I phoned my venue, the organizer was anxious and said Lily Parker had called that morning to reschedule the booking date. She declined since the voice didn't match my from past conversations, and now they want in-person verification for account changes. My hands were texting frantic texts to James while Charlotte talked about her wedding preparations utilizing my florist, caterer, band, and everything else I'd spent months arranging. It's odd that the photographer mentioned Charlotte picked up images last night without calling to check. How casually she waltzed in saying Lily sent her seems odd, especially because wedding images are intimate. In 20 minutes, James walked past everyone to locate Ben in the corridor, his face black with wrath. He directly asked Ben whether he knew what Charlotte was doing, and Ben's puzzled look told us everything before he spoke. Ben stated Charlotte told him I'd offered to let them use my wedding plans because they were getting married, and that we'd negotiated a vendor discount. The poor guy believed we were working together and was horrified when James clarified. That night at my kitchen table, Sophia and I went through every vendor contract, updating passwords and security questions to all my accounts and changing contact emails. She said Charlotte tried on my sample arrangement last week, putting it up to her dress as the florist snapped photographs. The florist thought we were shopping together because Charlotte knew my order down to the rose colors and stem ribbon I wanted. That afternoon, I received a flood of calls from family members I hadn't spoken to in weeks. My Aunt Linda phoned first, puzzled about if the wedding was still going after Charlotte urged her to keep her calendar flexible in case the date changed. Since Charlotte offered to organize communications for both ceremonies, my cousin Sarah texted to inquire if we were having a double wedding. While receiving calls, I signed onto my wedding website on my laptop. I couldn't believe what I saw when the page loaded, but the password worked. Charlotte included a full section about a double wedding party with photographs of herself and Ben from their engagement shoot in my outfit. The heading now read Lily Parker and James and Charlotte and Ben's wonderful day, explaining how the sisters shared their perfect moment. I saw 20 new persons on Charlotte's RSVP list with Instagram handles instead of email addresses. James walked over and started browsing Instagram on his phone. His face paled as he turned the phone toward me after finding our wedding hashtag. Charlotte used Lily and James 2024 to upload daily content, making it appear like she was preparing her wedding. The engagement images in my dress garnered over 45,000 likes and hundreds of comments praising the gorgeous bride and inquiring about wedding arrangements. Thousands of followers assumed they were following my wedding journey, not hers. James and I headed to my parents' house with the screenshots and evidence. When we entered, Mom was in the kitchen and Dad was reading in his chair, gazing up uncomfortably at us. I displayed the modified website, Instagram postings, and bewildered family texts on the table. Dad shuffled uneasily but kept silent while Mom looked at everything and smiled like nothing was wrong. She claimed Charlotte was delighted and playing, so I should feel flattered. Sibling wants to be like me. Mom waved her hand and stated pooling resources would save everyone money when I mentioned Charlotte meddling with my vendors. 2 days later, Sophia brought her laptop and helped me construct new social media accounts with alternate handles and a password-protected wedding website. The evidence folder on my computer has screenshots with timestamps of everything Charlotte did for hours. Sophia began shaking her head while we worked, saying she'd seen similar behavior in hospital patients with personality problems. She advised legal protection before things worsened. James's sister was a downtown paralegal, so I met her the next morning. After listening to everything and reviewing our evidence folder, she said I may get a restraining order but needed additional proof of injury or danger. She advised writing a cease and desist letter first to provide a paper record if we escalated. I hesitated because I knew this would seriously upset my family, but James grabbed my hand and demanded we safeguard our wedding from being hijacked. Sophia emailed me a link with the words, "You need to see this now," in all caps while I was cooking supper. Charlotte's Instagram video showed her touring her wedding dress in my seamstress's shop. She strolled around the garment on the mannequin, pointing out intricacies and said she and the seamstress planned everything. After months of planning, I recognized the backdrop cutting table where I'd spent hours choosing fabrics and debating changes. Charlotte's vision was lauded and many asked whether she accepts clothing commissions. I phoned the seamstress immediately and she sounded terrified and sorry. She said Charlotte arrived that morning to check on wedding last-minute changes. Charlotte started recording and chatting on her phone like she owned the business before the seamstress could grasp what was happening. The seamstress urged Charlotte to remove the video, but Charlotte banned her on all social media. She promised to clarify the reality but was afraid Charlotte's supporters would criticize her online and ruin her business. After 2 days of Charlotte's posts going viral, Ben arrived at my apartment door alone, perplexed and unhappy. James allowed Ben in while I was in the kitchen, and Ben showed us something on his phone that made me sick. He kept screenshots of our text chats, which I never sent. Messages saying I consented to the double wedding and thanked him for his support. He showed us his genuine text history where his real conversations to me had been removed and replaced with false supporting answers that made me seem on board with everything. I suggested Charlotte wear my grandmother's jewelry for the wedding photographs in one of the bogus messages, which explains her current posts. Ben slumped heavily on our couch and massaged his face with both hands before revealing he'd doubted Charlotte for weeks. She studied my wedding preparations every night, copied my vendor contracts word for word, and practiced my signature on scratch paper. He found a notepad in her desk drawer with hundreds of Lily Parker's pen to resemble my handwriting. Also, she now called the wedding our day, meaning her day, not theirs. James scheduled a legal appointment for the next morning while I stared at my phone at the kitchen table. The lawyer's office was downtown in an ancient building with creaking elevators and tight halls. She took notes on a yellow legal pad while listening to our narrative. After we finished, she put down her pen and said Charlotte was doing wrong, but proving actual injury in court would be difficult. Without theft or violence, our case would be challenging. She advised us to document everything and consider suing for mental anguish. I photographed every communication, social media post, and vendor email. After months of planning, I headed to the bakery for my cake taste a week later. I froze as I entered. Charlotte was there at my appointment time, tasting samples and pointing at cake design photographs. The baker appeared surprised when I stated my appointment. Charlotte showed me looking texts stating we'd share the tasting on her phone. I reacted when she grinned and remarked, "We might as well taste cakes together since we were both already there." I shouted at her in front of everyone that she was a liar and thief. Voice grew louder. Charlotte opened her eyes and cried, telling the baker and other customers that I'd always envied her. She said I couldn't share attention and was ruining her engagement. The baker urged us to leave. James browsed Charlotte's Instagram on his phone as I shook in my vehicle. He went pale after finding anything. She posted old family photos modified to show me playing dress-up as a child. She photoshopped her face over mine. Rewriting our childhood, she made it seem like she always adored weddings. Timestamps proved she modified them all in recent weeks. On Sunday, I drove to my parents' house for our customary family meal but couldn't get out. Charlotte showed Mom something on her phone via the living room window. Probably more wedding things. My automobile was parked when Dad peered out the window, neither waved nor came outdoors, just drove away. Monday morning my phone was full with alerts. Charlotte advertised her wedding on all social media, before mine by 1 week. She labeled all my merchants and utilized my timeline, but pushed it ahead 6 days. Her article received hundreds of shares and comments from people offering sponsorship. My caterer contacted an hour later to ask about the date change and whether they were conducting 2 parties. Ben found bogus texts on his phone saying Lily consented to everything. Talk about advanced identity theft. Charlotte steals wedding plans too. She writes fan fiction about Lily as a supporting character in her life. Someone pretending to be me called to move things up a week. They had to confirm both events in writing with fresh deposits or cancel one. Charlotte's goal seemed clear to me. James drove to Ben's workplace that afternoon without notifying me. Ben invited him in and they spoke for over an hour. James informed me Ben confessed when he got home. Charlotte pushed him to propose so she could book venues legally. The engagement images were phony. He didn't propose. Because Charlotte stated she'd injure herself if he didn't support her wedding fantasy, he did everything. That night, I couldn't sleep and browsed my laptop's old images. Charlotte wore my stuff in every birthday, graduation, and holiday photo. My jewelry during her Sweet 16, blazer at college graduation, and lucky bracelet at her job interview. The pattern was always there, but I'd never assembled it. 2 weeks passed with additional vendor calls and social media posts. Sophia cried on my phone one day. Charlotte was texting my other bridesmaids on Instagram, she discovered. She offered to compensate them for both weddings as an influencer partnership. 2 were considering it because they needed student loan money. Sophia claimed manipulation, but broke college students needed $900. 20 minutes later, the venue coordinator worried on the phone. Someone contacted that morning to cancel our booking, not simply modify the date. Only because James was identified as co-signer and they couldn't reach him at his workplace for confirmation did it fail. She claimed more. Last night, their security cameras showed someone trying to enter their workplace after hours. She emailed me the tape immediately, and I viewed it on my laptop while she spoke. Charlotte was at the rear door trying keys from a massive ring at 2:17 a.m. A stranger stood next to her with lock-picking equipment. They spent 40 minutes fixing the door, but the new security system kept them out. The venue management stated this was enough to permanently ban Charlotte and would assist with legal proceedings. Mom called screaming as I was thinking about this. She started reciting numbers and weeping, unable to construct sentences. Dad found his credit cards were maxed up that morning when his gas station card was refused. Charlotte booked wedding vendors around Phoenix using their information. 3 wedding planners, photographers, florists and caterers were engaged, 4 sites had deposits, and personalized invitations had urgent delivery. The damage exceeded $25,000. Mom asked me to fix it without contacting the police because she couldn't bear having her daughter detained. Charlotte had committed identity theft and fraud, I informed her. She cried harder. Dad phoned me from his office an hour later, whispering. He stated he had a dossier on Charlotte for years but never showed anyone since Mom always excused her. He had images of wrecked property, permission documents with falsified signatures, and intricate tales she told teachers and neighbors from when we were youngsters. Mom urged him to ignore high school police reports. He supported my decision but was afraid Mom would never forgive him for opposing Charlotte. Next morning, James and I met Ben at a coffee shop. He looked exhausted and hadn't slept in days. He gave us his phone and showed us thousands of texts from his sister questioning why he ignored her. Before checking a friend's phone, he'd never received messages. Charlotte intercepted his mail and blocked his phone lines, informing his family he didn't want touch. His mom felt he hated her since Charlotte responded to her SMS as him and said horrible things. He showed us his mother's genuine texts, asking what she'd done wrong. After 2 days of attorneys and police complaints, things worsened. The receptionist knocked on the conference room door appearing worried during a work meeting. She said my sister was in the foyer with a video team, demanding to record. Charlotte was with 2 people with excellent cameras and lights when I left. She ran toward me with her arms extended, claiming this was our big reconciliation episode for her YouTube sister wedding planning series. She continued coming after I urged her to leave. Cameras tracked every step. She grabbed my arm and told the camera we were best friends planning my wedding. She pushed by the receptionist as I returned to my office. Security had to forcefully remove her as she yelled I was ruining her job and life. The whole encounter was captured on a phone and posted on social media that night. The remarks were harsh. Half calling her a loyal sister seeking to reconcile, half criticizing her erratic conduct. Her Instagram and Facebook followers called me selfish and uncaring. Some claimed I should be grateful for a kind sister. Some issued death threats. James discovered me in our bathroom that night with scissors and a mirror view of my hair. I was growing it out for the wedding, but Charlotte continually imitated my haircuts, even coloring hers the same color. I told him I wanted to take it all off to have something for me. He gently removed the scissors and hugged me while I wept, saying we should safeguard what mattered, not change ourselves because of her. Ben texted the next morning saying he was breaking up with Charlotte and needs help leaving safely. He was staying at a motel, but she discovered him and sent hundreds of SMS. She had began manipulating images to make him seem unfaithful, threatened to harm his job, and claimed he mistreated her. She offered him an hour to return or she'd put everything online. James, Sophia and I drove straight to the motel. Ben handed us his phone, and in 1.5 hours, she'd sent over 300 texts with death threats, vows to change, suicide threats, and detailed details of how she'd wreck his life. He screenshotted everything but feared she'd injure herself or him. We helped him craft a final answer declaring the relationship was done and he blocked her number. Afterward, phoned a crisis intervention agency to check her health. Ben contacted James and me the next morning to meet him at the police station to report Charlotte's threats. We drove downtown and found him fatigued in the lobby with black bags under his eyes and his phone in a plastic bag for evidence. A 50-year-old lady collected our testimonies and listened closely as Ben showed her the 300 texts, including death threats and detailed details of Charlotte's plans to destroy his life. I watched venue security footage on my phone and saw Charlotte trying to break in at 2 a.m. and beating on the doors when her keycard didn't work. The police took notes and copied everything but emphasized that without physical violence their options were restricted and restraining orders would take weeks. Since this was Charlotte's second complaint, she provided us case numbers and papers to fill out and added it to her file. After a week, my wedding planner contacted while I was at work and seemed thrilled for the first time since this disaster began. She spent the week working with our vendors to improve security, including picture ID and a password for order updates. She also learned via her network that Charlotte had been banned by 3 Phoenix venues for aggressive conduct, including trying to convince a bride to move dates so she could have the slot. Charlotte was quickly becoming known in the wedding market, and numerous providers had highlighted her. My planner said she'd never seen anyone burn so many bridges so quickly and that Charlotte couldn't book anything decent in the state. Dad texted me 2 days later to meet for lunch at his downtown office. When I arrived, he shoved a huge manila folder on his desk toward me with sorrowful eyes. The records included 20-year-old report cards with teachers' comments on Charlotte's bullying and lack of empathy. 3 therapists Mom took her to as a teenager left notes, all urging rigorous therapy for antisocial tendencies, which Mom never did. The worst was Charlotte's sophomore year police report, when she was found using her roommate's credit cards and opening new accounts using her name. Mom hired a lawyer and bribed a roommate to drop charges, and it was forgotten. Dad saved everything, even emails where Mom apologized and said Charlotte needed more love and support. Ben said Charlotte threatened to kill herself if he didn't attend her sham wedding. That's a significant claim to drop in. I wonder what Ben hasn't spoken about their connection and how long this deception has gone on. After years of trying to help Charlotte, Mom constantly stopped him and threatened divorce if he persisted. When I made supper 3 days later, my phone kept vibrating with alerts. Charlotte released a 20-minute video on every platform stating Ben had assaulted her and I'd charmed him to take him. She modified copies of earlier texts to seem menacing and captioned happy photographs to look like she was hiding bruises. Charlotte sobbed on cue as she discussed her pain and betrayal in the professionally made film with sorrowful music. Drama stations picked it up and added discussion within an hour, generating thousands of views and shares. My notifications were flooded with comments calling me a homewrecker and Ben an abuser. James phoned his sister, an internet defamation lawyer, to come over that night with her laptop. She helped us seek emergency injunctions to remove the video and began litigation preparation. While examining Charlotte's web presence, she found something intriguing. Charlotte's 45,000 followers were mostly ClickFarms bots, and her interaction ratings were exaggerated with sponsored services. Every platform's rules of service prohibited this, which may get her permanently banned if reported. We spent hours gathering bot buy proof and false engagement pattern images. James's sister stated this was the clearest internet scam she'd encountered and started reporting each platform. We were working at late when someone pounded on my flat door so hard the walls trembled. I spotted Mom through the peephole with mascara on her cheeks and messy hair. She pushed past me as I answered the door, crying that Charlotte was in the hospital after swallowing a bottle of pills and it was my responsibility. She ranted that I'd pushed my sister too far with unlawful threats and that Charlotte would never forgive me if anything occurred. She ordered I dismiss all accusations and litigation immediately, or I would eternally be responsible for Charlotte's blood. James tried to soothe her, but she smacked his hand and screamed we were monsters who drove a young girl to suicide. She departed after an hour of screaming and wailing to return to the hospital. I felt terrible in my dark living room when she departed, knowing this was manipulation. James held me as I attempted to figure out how Charlotte had still made herself the victim. And myself the villain in everyone's eyes. All those treatment records Dad showed me made me question whether I'd ever break this cycle. Ben called 2 days later from the hospital parking lot where he'd gone despite warnings. After the suicide attempt he felt horrible and wanted to check on her. After entering her room he heard her on the phone giggling about how well her plan worked. She told whoever it was that she'd calculated how many pills to take to need medical treatment but not do significant damage and timed a video release for maximum compassion. He videotaped some of the chat on his phone before a nurse ordered him to leave. Sophia contacted me an hour later from her hospital's other wing as a nurse. She risked her career to corroborate Ben's overheard conversation with Charlotte's hospital colleagues. After ingesting a non-lethal sleeping drug that required stomach pumping but no medical assistance, Charlotte contacted 911. The call was made exactly 1 hour after the video went up to maximum compassion. Sophia's co-worker reported Charlotte texted and took photos throughout the ER, seeming more concerned with her beauty than her health. The next morning, my lawyer sued Charlotte and Ben for defamation for bogus abuse charges. After receiving bot farm legal letters and documents, the site removed Charlotte's videos. Her accounts were stopped for 48 hours awaiting investigation, and numerous influencer businesses who were contemplating sponsorship arrangements deserted her immediately after seeing the lawsuit. More evidence of false followers and controversy shattered her online identity. James demanded I attend a therapist the next week to digest my family's events. My therapist in a modest facility near downtown Phoenix had me fill out family dynamics papers that showed me how bad things were. She listened as I described the clothing, images, and bogus social media profiles. I finished, and she remarked, "I'd been experiencing emotional abuse for years. I'd never thought of it that way before." But she explained how Charlotte's habit of removing my belongings and my parents constantly explaining it taught me my feelings didn't matter. We set limits and she helped me see Charlotte's decisions weren't my fault. Despite Mom messaging me that I was wrecking the family. Dad reviewed previous bank statements since the lawyer wanted financial documents for the restraining order lawsuit. Found something that made him contact me quickly. Small withdrawals from Mom's savings account were found back 5 years. Always under alert levels. They all went to Charlotte's accounts when he tracked them. He investigated and found she'd been withdrawing money from their joint accounts, Mom's personal account and their medical emergency fund. The theft totaled over $45,000 over time. Another problem was that Dad uncovered 3 credit cards he'd never opened when he checked his credit. He summoned me to check mine, and I found 4 unknown cards in my name. Charlotte kept the cards active by paying minimal payments since they were opened years earlier. The amounts were maxed up and my credit score was being ruined without my knowledge. The designated investigator began investigating after we submitted police complaints immediately. Within days, she located additional victims. Even Charlotte's college roommate had strange credit cards. 2 old pals who'd cut her off years before for unspecified reasons did too. This was over a decade of identity theft and financial crime, according to the detective. Though modest enough to elude examination, quantities can reach hundreds of thousands of dollars. A week later, the detective contacted to say they had enough evidence for an arrest warrant and inquired where Charlotte was staying. After Ben received his restraining order, Mom insisted she go back home, so I told them she was at my folks'. Mom screamed that police were at the house on Tuesday morning, so I knew about the arrest. I drove over and parked down the street to observe everything without being seen. Mom was screaming to the police that I was vengeful, envious, and attempting to ruin my sister's life as 2 cars were in the driveway. Through the front window, I saw Charlotte performing, sobbing, and talking about her anxiety and sadness, and how I'd always envied her success. The cops saw the false accounts, stolen money, and identity theft, so they didn't believe her victim act. Mom screamed that she'd sue everyone, and that I wasn't her daughter as they released her in handcuffs. Charlotte glanced at me in my car, and showed me her wrath for a moment before wailing for the neighbors who had come out to watch. After the police cars went, I stayed there for a long time, grieving for what never was. For the sister I may have had if she'd received assistance instead of being enabled for unrealized relationships. My connection with my sister was ended, and I drove home knowing it was permanent. Over the next month, while Charlotte was in jail for failing to pay bail, I felt safe enough to start wedding plans again. When I explained why I had to postpone, my vendors were quite accommodating and offered discounts or enhancements. My florist informed me another bride's sister tried to cancel all her arrangements out of anger. My caterer told me of a mother who wanted to modify the food without telling the bride. After seeing everything, the wedding industry rallied behind me to ensure every element was beautiful and secure. Dad testified about the stolen money at the preliminary court 2 weeks after the arrest, angering Mom. She filed for divorce the next day and attended my wedding dress fitting. That afternoon, Mom started hammering on the door and yelling that I'd wrecked her family, turned my father against her, and was cruel and manipulative like Dad's mother, so the seamstress had to shut the door. She shouted that I was no longer welcome at family functions, that she'd show everyone who I was, and that I'd regret this forever. Mom's divorce because Dad testified about stolen money is peak shoot the messenger energy. Like being upset at your smoke alarm for alerting you the home is on fire while you're holding the matches. Mom spray-painted liar on my car windshield before leaving when the seamstress phoned the police. Ben unexpectedly called me from his therapist's office a few days later to apologize with his therapist there. He regretted aiding Charlotte and not recognizing the truth about her actions during the picture session with my outfit. He requested James and myself to draft character statements for his restraining order hearing while he was in treatment rebuilding his life. He volunteered to testify in our criminal case if required, citing other Charlotte actions that may aid. Because I could tell he was attempting to change and had been manipulated by Charlotte, I wrote the statement. Dad asked if we could have a private meal 2 weeks before my wedding, something we hadn't done in years. He looked worn and older when we met at a tiny Italian restaurant, like the last 6 months had aged him a decade. He apologized for not protecting me from Charlotte as a child, for choosing peace over justice, and for allowing Mom convince him that family was more essential than safety. Now in treatment, he was overcoming guilt and codependency and discovering how he'd been misled for years. Despite all I knew, he loved me and was trying to make things right, so I let him walk me down the aisle. The next morning, a stranger lawyer called to say he represented Charlotte and had an offer. He promised Charlotte would plead guilty to lower charges provided I spoke at her sentencing. I wanted to claim the wedding dress scenario was a sister misunderstanding and that I didn't want her in prison. After I replied no, he went silent and suggested I might want to rethink since Charlotte had information about my actions that might be humiliating in court and harm my wedding and future. Immediately after hanging up, I phoned my lawyer to report the threat. Within 2 days, he had something that made my stomach churn after promising to investigate. His investigator gained access to Charlotte's apartment through the building management while she was in jail and uncovered a hellish scrapbook. She kept a huge binder with anything humiliating about me she could find. There were images of me with braces and horrible acne at 12, a video snapshot of me collapsing at my middle school talent performance, copies of my journal pages she took years ago, and a list of every person who'd rejected me with reasons why. The lawyer said this was more than sibling rivalry. Our situation would benefit from fixation and stalking. I couldn't sleep that night. I had the worst wedding nightmare when I did. Charlotte wore my outfit exactly. Mom told the guests I borrowed Charlotte's wedding plans. Everyone was puzzled about the true bride, and James stood at the altar unsure which sister to marry. I woke up gasping and shaking, so James held me for 20 minutes before I could describe my dream. He reassured me we'd hired 3 security guards and Charlotte would be locked up on our wedding day, but I couldn't shake it. Following 2 weeks of meetings and paperwork, the prosecutor phoned with news. They offered Charlotte 15 months in prison, forced mental therapy, and a permanent restraining order if she pleaded guilty. The prosecution said Charlotte's public lawyer begged her to accept it, but she refused. She wanted a lengthy trial to tell her narrative and establish I was the villain. The next day, a big package with the jail's return address came at my residence. Charlotte's handwriting got dirtier and angrier over 10 pages. She wrote that I'd always been the chosen kid, stole every wonderful thing she should have had, and only took my stuff because I took her parents' love first. The worst page was the final, when she threatened to ruin my wedding from prison if I didn't drop the accusations. I gave the letter to the prosecutor, who put it to the evidence file and gave me some comfort. Charlotte was calling from jail to ruin my wedding, but she didn't know where all conversations are recorded. She was phoning old acquaintances, distant relatives, and even strangers to offer favors if they crashed my wedding or caused trouble. Every call was kept as witness tampering and harassing evidence. Sophia assisted with my last dress fitting at the seamstress a week later. After all the stains and beading repairs, the dress looked great. I cried when I put it on and looked in the mirror because I could finally enjoy wearing it without worrying about Charlotte damaging it. Sophia said I looked great and embraced me. We laughed and took photographs for an hour before this happened. Mom visited my office over lunch 6 days before the wedding. After security stopped her at the front desk, she screamed that I was sending my sick sister to prison and that I was a callous monster ruining our family, so everyone in the lobby could hear her. She waved a packet of old pictures of me and Charlotte as kids to emphasize how close we were. When I returned upstairs, my co-workers were sympathetic, but I felt ashamed that my family issue was becoming office entertainment. The prosecutor called that afternoon to tell me Charlotte would be in detention until the trial 2 weeks after my wedding. I should have felt relieved, but I kept worrying something might go wrong. I hired 2 additional security guards and provided the wedding organizer images of Charlotte and Mom with explicit instructions not to allow them near the event. I went to the site alone 3 days before the wedding to stand in the empty ballroom and envisage my day without this. The coordinator explained the security precautions, including off-duty police officers at every entry, ID checks for attendees against the approved list, and a safe place in case I needed to leave immediately. Though it wasn't the carefree party I imagined when James proposed, it would be mine. That night, Ben called with a troubled voice. Someone pretending to be Charlotte's friend offered him $4,500 to stand up during our ceremony and protest or create a commotion. He filmed the whole discussion on his phone, and the guy accidentally revealed that Helen, my mother, was paying them to find someone to spoil the wedding because she couldn't. My phone was full of texts and missed calls at 6 o'clock the next morning, my wedding day. Sophia called, and when I answered, she was speaking so quickly I couldn't hear her. Starting at 5 a.m., someone called all the wedding guests to cancel due to a family emergency. Half of our visitors were bewildered and questioning what occurred, while the other half were planning their Saturday. I was in disbelief when Sophia and the other bridesmaids called everyone back to mend the damage. James texted that his groomsmen were working on the guest list and advised me not to worry. One bridesmaid's phone company pal called with news within an hour. A burner phone acquired yesterday with my mother's credit card made the calls. While getting dressed, I tried to ignore my mother's attempts to ruin my wedding. My dad arrived at the hotel suite with a packet of documents and a scowl. He filed for a restraining order against Helen in court yesterday without notifying me. She was banned from 500 feet of me and the wedding location after the judge approved it based on the prior few weeks' evidence. He hired 4 more security guards with his own money and had them scrutinizing every entry. I felt something in my pocket and pulled out a little folded letter while putting on my clothing. My seamstress said this dress has gone through hell like me, and I should wear it with pride because I deserved this day. Sophia had to reapply my makeup when I cried and sat down. A security guard contacted my dad 2 hours before the event. Helen was stopped at the venue gate with 3 women claiming to be Charlotte's pals. For Charlotte's Injustice documentary, all 4 held up phones and filmed everything. Helen was arrested for breaking the restraining order when the security guard alerted the police. When the police cars arrived, the 3 ladies ran, but one shouted that this wasn't finished. $4,500 to wreck a wedding. Mom privately donating so much through bogus pals while her daughter is in jail is unusual. What more has Helen been doing with the family money behind closed doors while playing victim? As visitors arrived, James drew me away with stomach-churning news. The prosecutor phoned him because Charlotte had been freed on bond that morning, owing to a prison paperwork error. They were trying to rearrest her, but nobody knew where she was. Security boosted patrols and checked every car entering the parking lot. Someone raced in 30 minutes before the event, stating they spotted Charlotte in the parking lot near the back entrance. Security ran out as we held our breath, but they returned 10 minutes later looking perplexed. The mannequin dressed like Charlotte was pushed up against a car with a letter that said, "Wish I could be there, sis." It was mind tricks, but it worked because everyone was on edge, looking over their shoulders. I gazed in the mirror in the bridal suite alone before the ceremony. I looked great in the sand-stained, mended and repaired garment. My expression indicated my exhaustion from battling yet my will to survive today. I resolved then that Charlotte had stolen enough from me and that this day was about James and me no matter what. The ceremony began, and my dad and I went down the aisle past friends and relatives who had come despite the difficulties. I didn't search the throng for Helen or Charlotte, who could be hiding. I stared at James at the altar, waiting for me with a wide smile. We finished the ceremony and were exchanging vows when a phone rang loudly in the rear rows. I tensed up, ready for something horrible to happen as everyone froze. Someone accidentally set off their alarm and fumbled to turn it off while apologizing. I laughed as I realized I'd been holding my breath. After James gripped my hands, I said my vows with excitement for the first time all day. James and I danced our first dance to our song, not Charlotte's false wedding song, during the reception, which began calmly. I forgot about the turmoil for a few minutes as others ate and laughed. But then I spotted the security guys examining their phones and speaking like they were monitoring something. The DJ called for toasts 20 minutes later, and one of the security officers nodded toward the rear door. Then Ben entered. He wasn't on the guest list, but the guards allowed him in on purpose. He appeared slimmer and his outfit no longer fit. Some whispered when they spotted him, but he went straight to the microphone. He cleared his throat and stated he wasn't invited but needed to speak. He briefly apologized for believing Charlotte's falsehoods and thanked me for enlightening him. He said he'd been admitted to grad school in another state and was beginning again. After a few seconds of silence, people clapped awkwardly yet supportively. The wedding organizer called me into the corridor, claiming I needed to know something. Charlotte was uploading Instagram stories from jail, calling my wedding terrible, and trying to trend a Bridezilla hashtag on her phone, she showed me. She posted old images stating she was at a nicer wedding after someone sneaked her a phone. I glanced at the post for 10 seconds, then gave her the phone and promised her it wouldn't spoil my night. Sophia began her maid of honor speech in the reception hall. She said true sisters are chosen, not born. She said seeing me develop stronger and find my voice without mentioning Charlotte, but everyone understood. The room stood and clapped for a minute when she finished. Michael asked if we could dance to that old tune he sang when I was small at parent dances. He murmured that he was proud of me for sticking up for myself and pledged to never let anyone hurt me again while we danced. It was the moment I always wanted with him but never imagined I'd receive. The event continued with dancing, cake, and photos. I received a call the next morning while waiting at the airport gate with James. The prosecution claimed Charlotte accepted a plea agreement that morning for 15 months in prison, 4 years probation, and required treatment. She had to repay the fraud's proceeds and couldn't contact me again. Finally, checking my phone on the aircraft, I noticed all Ethan's wedding images. People shared memories of our connection and relationship, not simply likes and hearts. I realized Charlotte never had meaningful, caring relationships. I video phoned Michael a week later while lounging by our resort pool. He looked lighter and told me he'd been to treatment twice. He started divorce procedures and looked into personality disorder support groups for families. Sophia started messaging me from home about Helen staying with her sister and writing about being a victim on Facebook. However, those who knew the truth were speaking out about Charlotte's actions. We returned home 2 weeks after the wedding to find Charlotte's public defender's email with a letter she wanted sent. I erased it without opening it after 30 seconds of staring. James stated I chose well and that genuine closure didn't need me to continue her abuse. My first therapy visit following the honeymoon focused on next steps. The therapist helped me deal with extended family who supported Charlotte and what to do if Helen reached out. My pain for Charlotte, the sister I never had, was also discussed. The next week, my co-workers had scattered cards and flowers on my desk after hearing rumors about what transpired. My manager called me into her office and said she liked how I handled everything. That my poise under duress demonstrated leadership and that they were considering me for the senior designer role next month. My roommate James and I moved across town. Simple, but with nice light and no memories of Charlotte. Michael came over to help us relocate and brought a box of old family photographs he'd gone through and took out all the ones sans Charlotte so I could still have childhood memories without her face. After the court documents were released, the local TV station wanted to interview me about family fraud and identity theft, but I declined and provided them a written statement about spotting toxic family habits early and obtaining treatment. James and I hosted Sophia, her boyfriend, and several friends for supper a few weeks after we moved in. When someone said the wedding was wonderful, I smiled without a tense chest. Charlotte's $15 a month jail employment reparation payments began 3 months later when the correctional department sent an envelope. I immediately donated whatever was left to a scam victim charity. I ran with Mrs. Henderson from my childhood street while shopping and she told me Helen was in treatment too. Finally acknowledging her involvement in everything, and that she wanted to apologize but knew I needed space, which I appreciated but wasn't ready for, and may never be. Ben wrote from Seattle, where he'd moved schools, thanking me for helping him see the reality and flee, stating he was in treatment and seeing someone fresh who didn't know about the issue, and pledging this would be his final contact as we needed to move ahead. I looked at my wedding dress, now well kept in its box, and thought about everything it had survived, the beach, the changes, the drama, and chose to donate it to a charity that gives garments to low-income women, making something painful attractive for someone else. In honor of our first anniversary, James and I enjoyed a peaceful meal at home with Michael, who showed us images from his Costa Rica vacation, his first in years without managing others' issues. That night, I deleted Charlotte's last images off my phone. Acceptance, not anger. Sitting in our living room with James reading and our new kitty purring. Sophia texting about weekend plans lit up my phone. Michael sends newly discovered humorous memes. James's mother's tamale recipe. I realized this was my true family. The ones that loved and supported me. After weeks without thinking about Charlotte, I felt victorious. Not the money or legal issues, but the calm of not caring. I put down my phone and took up my sketchbook to start a new design project. Life is now progressing like it should. It's been fun exploring with you.